Hey everyone, welcome back. Quick thanks to the patrons who keep this channel alive. Your requests are what I narrate next. If you want to join them, you can try Patreon free for 7 days, then it's starting with just $3 a month. Links in the description. Now, let's get into the story.
You cannot make eye contact with the basilisk, nor can you see it through reflections from other objects. Raven could only roughly determine the location of the basilisk's head by hearing, then use light and shadow without a trace to lock onto the basilisk and immediately activate bombardment mode. Regardless of whether the attack is aimed at the snake's eye or not, just keep attacking. As long as the speed and number of attacks are sufficient, some attacks will definitely hit the snake's eyes. The basilisk was dumbfounded. It smelled the scent of the two young wizards around the corner, but it really didn't expect one of them to be so fierce. A simple gesture can trigger a surprise attack. The key is that the terrifying attack source is completely unseen. Where did it come from? What does it look like? I know nothing, and there's absolutely no way to hide. The basilisk was attacked as soon as it poked its head out. The torrential attacks nearly shredded the head of this 100-year-old snake. Its eyes were also lacerated during this time. Because Raven used carpet bombing, many deep wounds appeared on the surrounding ground. Roar. The basilisk let out a painful cry. Little wizard, you have no sportsmanship. You ambushed me, a 100-year-old snake. Feeling it's about time, Raven reversed his grip on his wand. Summon the demon. A blue and white knight about 2 meters tall suddenly appeared behind him. Following the sound, Raven steered the knight toward the basilisk. Unable to pinpoint the snake's head, Raven had no choice but to have the knight charge at it in the most savage way possible. With a loud bang, Raven finally opened his eyes. As expected, the basilisk's eyes had been completely blinded. Now that his biggest weapon is gone, he's just meat on Raven's chopping board. Raven flicked his wand, spun around, and an invisible force of light pulled the basilisk to the ground. Then he cast a whisper of all beings on himself. Stop struggling now, or I'll kill you right now. He spoke, making a hissing sound. The night spirit had already stepped on the basilisk's head, pressing down on its skull with all its might. The knight's sword was now placed in front of the basilisk. With a single thought, Raven could send the spirit shoving the sword into the basilisk's head. Raven was prepared. If the basilisk couldn't understand him, he would immediately cut off its head. Hiss. The basilisk clearly showed signs of struggling. The snake voice can control snakes. The whispers of all living beings are also spoken in the snake voice. If Voldemort were to resurrect and personally command the basilisk would certainly choose to obey Voldemort rather than Raven. Because Voldemort was Salazar Slytherin's successor, and this basilisk was the legacy Salazar Slytherin left to his successor. When the orders of others conflict with the orders of the successor, the basilisk will always obey the orders of the successor first, rather than the orders of others. However, the young Voldemort is still a diary. Even opening the secret room required him to control others. Finally, the basilisk gave up struggling and obediently stopped. Behind Raven, Colin was completely terrified. He couldn't resist glancing at the basilisk out of curiosity. Had Raven not already shattered the basilisk's eyes, he would probably be the next Weeping Myrtle by now. For Merlin's sake, Professor McGonagall was closest, so she rushed over and witnessed this scene. The night demon stood firmly on the snake's head, his sword still poised near its eye, as if the sword would pierce through at the slightest provocation. Raven pointed his wand at the basilisk. He wasn't so foolish as to lower his guard the moment the basilisk stopped struggling. I've finally come to a profound realization once again why the Sorting Hat said you were a perfect fit for Gryffindor, Mr. Vincent. Professor, could you please wait a moment before lecturing? First, could you put some kind of protective spell on the basilisk? I must say you did us a huge favor, Raven. Dumbledore watched as the basilisk was led out of the castle. Even someone as composed as him couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth at this moment. How come this kid always manages to get into such big trouble? Just when people think they've figured out his limits, he always manages to surprise them. A magnificent creature, what a strong and beautiful creature. Professor Kettleburn excitedly circled the basilisk. He was incredibly excited. This is a living, breathing basilisk. Even Newt Scamander, the master of fantastic beasts, had never seen one. Strong and beautiful, this guy does nothing. He can kill someone just by opening his eyes. If it weren't for Raven tonight, Colin would be turned into basilisk excrement. Ron whispered to Harry, complaining. The professors originally wanted the young wizards to stay in their dormitories. However, after examining the basilisk, Dumbledore stated that the basilisk's greatest threat had indeed been eliminated by Raven, and the remaining threats were its terrifying strength and venom, but these two factors posed no threat at all with so many professors present. This is a rare practical lesson. Although the professors were reluctant to hear Dumbledore say this, they still temporarily postponed the young wizard's bedtime. There's a whole bunch of curious little wizards standing outside the castle now. Professor Sprout is carefully examining Raven's body. This is too dangerous. You should have taken Mr. Colin and come find us immediately when you found it. Professor Sprout's heart is still pounding. That's a basilisk monster that can kill you if you're not careful. Neville, standing to the side, was also terrified, his face turning deathly pale. He was so frightened when he heard that Raven had caught the basilisk that his hands and feet went cold. Neville was about to go to sleep, but upon hearing the news, he rushed out to make sure Raven was all right. He lost one of his slippers while running out. Oh my God, this is terrifying. That's a basilisk, Raven. Neville swallowed hard. He felt that if he were to encounter this snake monster, he would be so frightened that he would freeze on the spot, and might even suffocate himself because he forgot to breathe. Don't worry, subduing it is quite simple. If you don't get close, its eyes are the only dangerous part. Professor Sprout slapped Raven on the back in exasperation. It's a basilisk too. If you hadn't caught it off guard, its terrifying speed and train-like size would have been enough to knock you away. You should always put your life first, understand. Raven thought to himself that his light and shadow without a trace had already bound the basilisk tightly. And even if the basilisk wanted to break free, it would depend on whether his magic power was sufficient. However, seeing Professor Sprout's worried look, Raven didn't say those words. Yes, Professor Sprout, there won't be a next time. Raven originally intended to kill the basilisk directly. But this is likely the only remaining basilisk in this group, so killing it would be a real shame. So Raven didn't do anything, but instead handed over the power of life and death to Dumbledore. The professors and Dumbledore also used the Whisper of All Beings to communicate with the basilisk, attempting to find out who had released it. The result is obvious. The basilisk might have some loyalty to Voldemort. After all, he was a descendant of Salazar Slytherin. However, it has no loyalty whatsoever to a puppet controlled by Voldemort. Under a life-threatening situation, the professors easily obtained a description of the person's physical characteristics. Men always dress like peacocks and always have a strong smell of cologne. Other more specific characteristics are no longer necessary to know. Currently, only one person at Hogwarts meets this criterion. The professors immediately sprang into action and grabbed Gilderoy Lockhart. This self-important fellow, in an effort to dispel any doubts others might have about him, deliberately arrived at the castle earlier than the other professors. When he was captured, he kept shouting that it was a huge misunderstanding, but the truth was revealed by Dumbledore's legilimency. That idiot doesn't really know occlumency. He only learned a basic introductory technique from Tom Riddle. It's a good thing he's an idiot, otherwise Raven would have seen Snape pull out a small green bottle. If Dumbledore's legilimency hadn't succeeded, Snape would probably have pried Lockhart's mouth open and given him a drop of truth potion. Well, if it doesn't break when you pour it, that counts as one drop. At that point, Lockhart will probably only be able to tell the truth for the rest of his life. Dumbledore identified the culprit, and the farce finally came to an end. The young wizards excitedly returned to their dormitories. They seemed both surprised and somewhat expectant about Lockhart being the mastermind. Raven stayed. Of all the young wizards, only he was qualified to learn the whole story from Dumbledore. So you mean the diary is no longer on Lockhart, but how could that be? It's only been a few days. Dumbledore also seemed somewhat annoyed. Unfortunately, yes, we found a black diary on Lockhart, but it wasn't a dark magic item. It was just an ordinary diary, someone switched it. What a coincidence. I think Tom did this on purpose. He's quite capable even if he's just a diary now. Tusk, I thought we could just resolve this matter directly. So what do we do now? We've already alerted them and the basilisk has been captured, so there probably won't be any more attacks. Dumbledore, however, seemed to be deep in thought. Perhaps we should focus on observing people whose vitality is weakening. Tom Riddle needs to continuously absorb the life force of others in order to be resurrected. Raven shook his head. What if he stops absorbing life force after this? Or what if he keeps changing holders, absorbing some life force from each one? Then we wouldn't be able to detect anything amiss. This problem is almost unsolvable, unless Dumbledore performs a deep legilimency on all the teachers and students. Dumbledore rubbed his temples, he looked somewhat tired. What you've said are indeed possible problems. Tom is definitely more cunning than I imagined. Who would have thought that just a few days after Ginny lost her diary, Tom Riddle had already sensed something was wrong and secretly had someone else take it away. Let me deal with Lockhart and the basilisk first. Knowing Tom's personality, he'll definitely be in a hurry. He's not the type to sneak around, but at least I hope he'll give himself away because of his anxiety. Dumbledore said. Raven was somewhat annoyed. He should have known better than to capture the basilisk today. Now look what happened. We didn't find the diary but instead alerted the enemy. Dumbledore, however, believed that the benefits outweighed the drawbacks. First, the diary had already been switched before tonight. Finding out about it later wouldn't help them solve the problem. Only by understanding it in advance could they come up with a solution sooner. Secondly, Raven stopped Tom Riddle from using the basilisk to harm the students. Protecting the young wizard's safety was the most important thing. Raven then asked Dumbledore why Lockhart had passed by the girls' restroom on Halloween night and even gone inside. Dumbledore said that Lockhart had planned to steal the spotlight at Halloween that night, but a certain white-haired little wizard stole the show. Lockhart was furious, and then channeled his grief and anger into his appetite, eating a great deal of food. Normally, this wouldn't have been a problem, but when the Geminis went on stage to ask the professors for candy, they secretly slipped a strong laxative into Lockhart's drink, and it worked wonders. Lockhart had just eaten a lot of food and then drank alcohol laced with a strong laxative. The result was predictable. In an effort to save face, he practically stormed out of the auditorium. After leaving the auditorium, he randomly picked a restroom in the corridor, without even checking if it was a men's restroom, and went straight in to relieve himself. As luck would have it, Ginny happened to be in the bathroom when he was released, and the diary ended up in the cubicle next to Lockhart's. Having absorbed a great deal of Ginny's life force, the diary possessed a certain ability to manipulate things from a distance, and thus the diary ended up in Lockhart's hands. What a coincidence. If Lockhart hadn't eaten so much, or if the twins hadn't given him a strong laxative, Lockhart would have missed the diary. The curses from the defense against the dark arts are truly terrifying. It was quite late when Raven left the spot. He took only 2 things from the basilisk, a few scales from its body and a venomous fang from its mouth. The chieftain absolutely loved the snake scales Raven brought back. These shiny, glossy scales, like glittering gold coins, easily aroused the chieftain's sniffing instincts. Ack was devastated after learning the truth. He said he never imagined that Lockhart was actually the heir to Slytherin and that he was the one who released the basilisk. If it weren't for Raven tonight, Colin's best outcome would probably have been being petrified. Most people were unaware of the existence of Tom Riddle's diary, nor did they know that it was Ginny who had released the basilisk. Therefore, at this moment, almost everyone believed that Lockhart was the final mastermind. Kieran and the others comforted Ack almost all night. Lane said that at least Lockhart's stories were excellent, and even if he really was the heir to Slytherin, he was also a very good storyteller. Dumbledore took Lockhart and the basilisk to the Ministry of Magic. Raven was supposed to go along, but Dumbledore said he didn't have to, and Raven didn't go. Life seemed to have returned to normal once again. Since Colin was practically the only person who witnessed the entire event, he became the new storyteller in the auditorium. Once he recovered, he told others every day how amazing Raven had been back then. He will speak as long as someone wants to listen. It's worth mentioning. Professor Flitwick, who initially didn't know the full picture, made a decision after listening to Colin's embellished full picture. Establish a dueling club. It specifically teaches young wizards how to fight and how to duel. Raven's combat skills and his mental fortitude during battles are already outstanding. When facing the basilisk, he could calmly suppress his fear, close his eyes, pull the terrified Colin behind him to shield him, and then use a spell with a wide attack range to bombard the basilisk's head, quickly disabling the enemy's most threatening move. Without a doubt, Raven once again demonstrated his excellent combat skills in this incident. However, Professor Flitwick was somewhat dissatisfied with Colin's reaction. While it's understandable that a first-year wizard would be terrified after encountering a basilisk, this is a rather blatant oversight. Colin, a young wizard who would be terrified in front of the basilisk, is not an isolated case at Hogwarts. Or rather, most of the young wizards at Hogwarts would definitely be terrified and at a loss for what to do in that situation, regardless of grade or academic performance. This worried Professor Flitwick somewhat. If the young wizards choose safe professions after leaving school, that's fine. But if they want to become aurors or do relatively dangerous jobs, their combat abilities are simply not enough. So after much deliberation, Professor Flitwick decided to start a dueling club. The club teaches young wizards how to fight danger. Raven hadn't expected the impact he'd have this time to be so great. As a result, Professor Flitwick even wanted to start a dueling club. However, this is also a good thing. It's always good to have more little wizards to share the beatings with each week. This semester, Raven is training his practical skills with Professor Flitwick. Raven thought his combat abilities were quite good, but he was no match for Professor Flitwick. Professor Flitwick managed to overwhelm Raven with just simple spells like exorcism and basic polymorph. With light and shadow appearing without leaving a trace, Raven would truly have a very difficult time defeating Professor Flitwick. This is even without Professor Flitwick using more powerful magic, and without being able to use apparition. If Professor Flitwick were to give him a free beating, Raven estimated that he would be running all over the classroom after about 10 rounds. Professor Flitwick's combat skills and mastery of spells are indeed top-notch. So what happened to that basilisk monster in the end? On the other side of the two-way mirror, Fleur was writing her thesis in her dormitory. The homework assigned to Fleur by Mrs. Maxim was one that Fleur had to take seriously. It was sent to Mr. Newt. It never really intended to kill any students. It only killed one student recently by accident, and that was purely accidental. It's clear that the basilisk monster genuinely didn't want to kill the students. Otherwise, how could the student have been petrified and left with a complete corpse? In the original story, there were many attacks, but only Moaning Myrtle was actually killed by the basilisk. The others were just petrified, and none of them even lost an arm or a leg. Perhaps their survival was merely a coincidence, but the basilisk didn't devour them after petrifying them. Logically speaking, human and cat meat should at least be much larger and tastier than rat meat from the sewers. Yet the basilisk still chooses to eat Hogwarts rats instead of students. As for the death of the Weeping Myrtle, it was indeed an accident. The bathroom already smelled terrible, and the basilisk had just crawled out of the sewers. It had no idea there was anyone else in the bathroom. As soon as it came out, Myrtle pushed open the door and they ended up staring at each other. However, although it was an accident, the basilisk admitted that it had indeed killed Myrtle. It killed an innocent Hogwarts student, an undeniable fact, and it was willing to bear the consequences. After it revealed all the information, Fudge originally intended to execute the basilisk directly. This would provide a reasonable explanation for Myrtle's family, for the public, and for Hagrid, who was wrongly accused of murder. However, Dumbledore suggested that instead of killing the basilisk, it would be better to hand it over to Newt so that Newt could find out more about it. He had considered killing the basilisk to avenge Myrtle, but in this whole affair, the basilisk seemed more like a weapon. The primary responsibility lies with Tom Riddle, not with the weapon that was almost powerless against him at the time. Fudge was initially reluctant to agree, because after executing the basilisk, he could manipulate public opinion and turn this incident into a political achievement. Overturn the wrongful convictions and miscarriages of justice from the previous ministerial term, and give the public and the victims the truth. Doesn't that immediately bring out Fudge's tall, meticulous image? Now handing over the basilisk, the real culprit, to Newt would be a terrible move. How could he not know what kind of person Newt is? The basilisk gave it to Newt, so he went off to enjoy himself. What will the newspapers say about him then? He'll be drowned in public criticism. But Dumbledore did not change his attitude. A basilisk monster, and most likely the last one on Earth, whose existence creates even more value. In the end, Fudge made a concession. He could fake the basilisk's death or secretly send it to Newt, but if the basilisk caused any more trouble afterward, Fudge would not hesitate to pin the blame on Dumbledore. Did it kill a student? Raven nodded as he read his book. The Weeping Myrtle, she's become a ghost and she's still in our school's washroom. The basilisk's eyes are too deadly. Did Dumbledore leave behind the basilisk? After all, it killed a student. I guess it's to study the basilisk more thoroughly. The wizards really know too little about it. Then we can also gain that knowledge through the veil spell, right? Raven shrugged slightly, who knows. Anyway, Dumbledore spared the basilisk, perhaps he has other plans. Tell me more about the Weeping Myrtle. Her personality is a bit twisted, but she's also quite pitiful. It said she was bullied a lot in school, and then tragically died after staring into the eyes of a basilisk. Even now, as a ghost, because of her twisted and eccentric personality, people still don't really like her. The bullying at Hogwarts is a really big problem. Yes, indeed. I really didn't want to come to this dueling club. I don't understand, this time could be used to rest or play for a while. Why do I have to come to this so-called dueling club? Ron was complaining to Raven about the duel club. He didn't really want to spend his weekend evenings training at this dueling club. But Harry and Hermione both wanted to come and see, so he was dragged along too. Stop complaining, Ron, it'll do you a good thing. Hermione said, frowning. Ron shrank back. He felt Hermione was becoming more and more like Professor McGonagall. As the old saying goes, if you can't resist, then enjoy it. At least his friends are all here, so he won't be too bored in class, right? Although he reluctantly accepted his fate of attending the duel club with Harry and Hermione over the weekend, Ron was still somewhat distracted. He looked around, trying to find something interesting in the dueling club. He succeeded. Good heavens, what am I seeing? Malfoy is actually here. Ron was genuinely surprised. In Ron's eyes, Malfoy was the epitome of a lazy, good-for-nothing kid. He actually spends time at the dueling club learning dueling techniques. This greatly surprised Ron. But Ron forgot that Malfoy's grades were actually quite good at Hogwarts as well. Last year in the rankings, Ron could only be considered to have narrowly defeated Malfoy. Malfoy may not be a very good person, but his learning ability and grades are still quite good. For Merlin's sake, even Malfoy knows he needs to study harder. Hermione's implication was that since Malfoy was working so hard, Ron, if you keep putting on this, you might actually be overshadowed by Malfoy. Ron was furious, his face turning red with anger as if he'd been stepped on. HMPH, I refuse to believe I'm inferior to him. Regardless, at least they've gained motivation. Raven chuckled and shook his head. After being beaten up last time, Malfoy toned it down considerably. At least he no longer frequently used that extremely insulting word. Raven didn't think Malfoy had changed for the better. He thought Malfoy was just scared. Wow, there are so many people. I thought everyone would want to get a good night's sleep on Sunday night. Cedric approached Raven. The number of people in the duel club at this moment truly exceeded his original expectations. Cedric had no idea that everyone at Hogwarts loved studying so much. Perhaps the basilisk incident scared everyone. I think it's more likely that your reputation attracted everyone. After all, the young wizards hadn't shown this much enthusiasm for learning since Quirrell released 3 trolls into the school last year. Are you kidding me? I don't have that much appeal. Besides, I'm not the one teaching everyone dueling and combat skills, I'm just a student. That's enough to attract everyone. Raven doesn't usually showcase his abilities in front of the public. Seeing Raven fight seriously is very appealing to many young wizards at Hogwarts. All right, everyone, quiet down. We're going to begin today's lesson. The short-statured Professor Flitwick appeared in the classroom. The number of young wizards who came to learn also exceeded his expectations. It looks like we'll have to move to a bigger classroom. This place is too small, but I'm glad to see everyone so enthusiastic. Because Professor Flitwick hadn't expected so many young wizards to come to the club on the first day, he hadn't asked other professors for help beforehand. Perhaps I should agree to Severus's offer. He was planning to come and help today too. Upon hearing this, most of the young wizards gasped in shock. That was close. I almost lost all my sleep tonight. Professor Flitwick had originally planned to teach some slightly more advanced magic, but seeing how many young wizards had come today, he decisively changed the curriculum. Let's start with something simple. Everything turned to petrification. It was thanks to this spell that Hermione was able to take Neville down in one go during their first year. However, Hermione is ultimately an exception. Few of the first, second, and third grade wizards are proficient in using this spell. Practice on your own first, but be careful not to use this spell on others. I'll find someone to spar with later and teach you the basic benefits of dueling. After speaking, Professor Flitwick went to instruct a few more young wizards before coming to Raven and the others. Sorry, Raven, you probably don't have much time today. It's all right, Professor Flitwick. Raven doesn't need Professor Flitwick's guidance to learn spells. He now only needs Professor Flitwick to guide him in learning combat skills through practical exercises. Wait until the little wizards. Before Professor Flitwick could finish speaking, a loud, explosive sound drew the attention of all the young wizards in the room. A young wizard, his face covered in dirt from the explosion, stood frozen in place, spitting out another cloud of dust. The other young wizards, realizing what was happening, burst into laughter. Professor Flitwick seemed somewhat exhausted. I must say I'm not surprised at all, Mr. Seamus. Professor Flitwick skillfully approached Seamus and began checking him for any injuries from the explosion. A year has passed, and Professor Flitwick has almost gotten used to Seamus's ability to occasionally deliver a thunderous explosion to himself and those around him. This talent is truly remarkable, but aside from spells related to explosions, Seamus struggles to learn and use any other spells. It's nothing, I just got covered in dirt again. Mr. Seamus cast the spell again, let me see what the problem is. After he finished speaking, Professor Flitwick moved a little further away. Seamus's reputation as a demolition genius was well-deserved. Once, while practicing spells, he almost set Professor Flitwick's clothes on fire. Gray whispered to Raven, Simmer's talent would be highly valued if he joined the army. In his hands, any spell can become an explosive spell. I want to know how he managed to turn 80% of the spells he practiced into explosion charms. It's incredibly baffling. Ryan was a little confused. Even Raven found the explosive genius's unreasonable talent utterly perplexing. Who knows? Anyway, Zemo's talent is extraordinary. Zemo used Petrify again, but the situation did not improve, and another explosion was heard. Professor Flitwick skillfully began to find problems for Zemo, guiding him step by step to successfully release the petrified torrent. Professor Flitwick spent almost all of his practice time with Seamus. Fortunately, Seamus's problems were quite common, so when he was instructing Seamus, the other young wizards could listen and then check their own spellcasting for any issues. Very good, I see that everyone has become somewhat familiar with this spell. Next, I will select 2 junior wizards to come forward and teach you the basic etiquette of dueling. Professor Flitwick originally intended to call Raven up, as Raven was so familiar with the basic etiquette of dueling that having him demonstrate would not lead to any mistakes. But Raven was too strong. If he didn't hold back, none of the young wizards present could have lasted a single round against him. If the battle is too short, young wizards may not retain a strong impression of the duel. Moreover, overly simplistic combat yields no gains for either side. Therefore, Professor Flitwick ultimately chose Ron and Hermione to fight. The choice of Hermione is self-evident. After all, in the professor's eyes, aside from Raven, Hermione is the most outstanding young wizard in the second year. Ron was chosen because he had worked very hard and achieved good results. Your Highness, do you think Hermione or Ron will win? I bet Hermione will win, but Fred insists on believing in our brother. Raven raised an eyebrow and looked at Fred. Do you really think Ron has a chance of winning? Fred seemed rather sneaky. You have to have the courage to bet on underdogs, right? And the odds on Ron are really high. Raven smiled silently. Even if the odds are high, you still need to be able to see the probability of success. I don't gamble, anyone with eyes can see the outcome. Hermione had been able to use Petrify since first grade, while Ron had only just learned the spell. Their levels of proficiency were completely different. If Ron abandons his wand and waits for the right moment to rush in and fight head-on, he still has a chance to win. If he doesn't close the distance, Hermione will take him down in a few rounds. Don't worry, Hermione, I'll hold back. Ron was completely dumbfounded. He was even secretly telling Hermione that he would go easy on her. Hermione and Harry were speechless upon hearing this. Well, perhaps their friends aren't necessarily great in other ways, but they are quite confident and have excellent manners. Come here, come over here. Stand facing each other, ideally with a distance of about 5 to 6 meters between you. Ron and Hermione came forwards. Ron seems very confident. Could it be that he has some trump card we don't know about? Kieran looked at Ron and whispered something to Raven. Raven's expression was somewhat complicated. He's probably just overconfident. Unfounded confidence. Ahead, Professor Flitwick continues to teach etiquette. Next, you should do this. Raise your wands and place them in front of you. The etiquette for the duel is somewhat similar to that of duels between cowboys in the old westerns. Very good, next you will bow to each other. This is to express your respect for your opponent. Very good, I will count down from 3. After I say start, you will cast spells on each other. Remember, do not use any offensive spells other than Petrify. The effect of the Petrify curse seems similar to that of the basilisk petrifying the little wizard. But in reality, to remove the Petrify curse, you only need to use a spell-breaking tool like Curse Stopper. The removal is simple and won't leave any aftereffects on the affected person. Professor Flitwick worried that the young wizards might hurt themselves if they used other spells. 3, 2, 1. Go. They're all petrified. As soon as Professor Flitwick finished speaking, Hermione swung her wand, throwing the petrification charm at Ron. Unexpectedly, although Ron was also startled, he almost instinctively dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding the curse. While Ron's amazing, he managed to dodge that. Ryan chuckled. Ron got off to a bad start. What will happen later? Ron, who was nearly hit, realized that the attackers were hostile, so he immediately adjusted his stance. They're all petrified. Armor for protection. Beautiful defense, Hermione. If this were in my class, I would definitely give you 5 extra points. The only offensive spell that can be used against the opponent is the petrification spell. But Professor Flitwick didn't say that you can't cast defensive spells on yourself. Oh my god, what kind of spell is this? Ron was stunned. How could Hermione have blocked his petrification spell so easily? A defensive spell, petrify them all. Ron was beaten and ran around in a sorry state. Hermione, on the other hand, seemed quite composed. She knows a lot of spells. Even if her only offensive spell is the petrification spell, she can find other spells to aid her. But Ron was different. Ron didn't know many spells to begin with, and the vast majority of them were minor evil spells. These spells were clearly offensive, and he couldn't use them at all right now. Aside from those minor curses, Ron basically didn't know any spells, so at this moment he could only be beaten and run around everywhere. Fight back, Ron, fight back at her. Don't run to the right, run to the left, not my left. It's your left. Fred and George's frantic cheering only made Ron's already confused mind even more a mess. Please shut up, I'm trying my best. However, his efforts did not have much effect. The water is as clear as a spring. Hermione conjured a puddle of water at Ron's feet and Ron stepped on it before he could react. The stone floor was already a bit slippery, and with the water on it plus Ron running a bit too fast, he couldn't stop in time and slipped and fell down. They're all petrified. With a final petrification spell, Ron was completely petrified on the spot, offering no resistance whatsoever. Excellent, a truly outstanding duel. Professor Flitwick lifted the curse on Ron and then gave him a thorough cleaning. Ron looked a little embarrassed. He had been so confident just moments before. Cough, I'm telling you this is for her. Fred rolled his eyes, then slapped Ron on the back of the head. He actually thought Ron was so confident because he had some trump card up his sleeve. He shouldn't have trusted Ron to be reliable. That's roughly the duel procedure. Next, I'll call you up in groups of 3 for your duels. Get ready. The space is too small. If everyone were to practice in groups at the same time, I'm afraid no group would be able to fully utilize their skills. It would be more reasonable to have 3 groups of 3. Raven, I want to give it a try with you. Cedric patted Raven on the shoulder, but Raven didn't respond. You're in 3rd grade now, you can't bully kids like that. Go find a rival in your own grade. Upon hearing this, everyone around Raven looked at him with disdain. You, a child. The duels between the young wizards were naive and funny. One of the young Slytherin wizards got so angry halfway through the fight that he used a minor evil curse. The Gryffindor students weren't pushovers either. Since the Slytherin students broke the rules first, they weren't obligated to follow them either. Then their duel turned into a barrage of minor curses. Professor Flitwick managed to separate them, but soon they were fighting hand-to-hand again off-stage. Finally, Professor Flitwick threatened to deduct points, which stopped them from fighting, but it seemed that neither of them was willing to back down. Most of the other junior wizards performed adequately, with only a few exceptionally good ones managing to pull off some tricks. For example, Percy used a beautiful transmutation spell to bind the opponent's legs, which gave him an opportunity. Okay, although this was a bit of an accident, I saw everyone's progress and the result was good. Okay. Raven felt that the first day was quite chaotic. However, some of the young wizards may have indeed learned something. At the very least, Ron must have learned the petrification charm, and he shouldn't be blindly confident or arrogant. That concludes this club gathering. Does anyone have any questions? Colin raised his hand. Please speak, Mr. Colin. Professor, when will you be guiding Raven in a practical match? Can we observe? These words reflected the thoughts of most of the young wizards present. Most of them came for Raven, but Raven hadn't made a move in the past 2 hours, which disappointed them all. Professor Flitwick looked at Raven upon hearing this. Raven shrugged slightly, and Professor Flitwick nodded slightly as well. I'll start instructing Raven shortly. His learning methods are slightly different from yours, but I think you can take a look as a preview, because you'll definitely need to practice in real combat like this in the future anyway. Honestly, this classroom is really not big enough. Normally, when Raven and Professor Flitwick were fighting, they would completely clear out a large classroom, but they obviously couldn't do that today because the other young wizards needed to watch. If they cleared out the lecture hall, some of the young wizards would definitely not be able to see the battle. The smaller battle arena means that the 2 players need to be more cautious in actual combat. Raven stepped forward and took off his wizard's robes. In actual combat where apparition cannot be used, robes are simply a hindrance. It didn't offer any better assistance. Instead, it hindered movement. He wore a crisp white shirt under his long robe. This is more suitable for movement than a long robe. Professor Flitwick also took off his somewhat bulky coat. Raven is improving very quickly. At first, Professor Flitwick could easily suppress him, but now he needs to use almost all his strength to win. A monstrous rate of progress. The area is defined as inside the circle. Leaving the circle results in a loss. How about that, Ravens? No problem, let's do it your way, Professor. Professor Flitwick flicked his wand, drawing a circular groove on the ground to mark out the playing area. Then a protective spell was cast, enchanting the entire area. Raven did some warm-up exercises to make sure he wouldn't injure himself later. I'll count down from 3, and when I say start, it'll begin. Professor Flitwick also drew his wand and got into position. 3, 2, 1. Go! As soon as he finished speaking, two spells shot out from the tips of Professor Flitwick's wand and Raven's wand, respectively, heading straight for each other. Raven silently cast a spell to test the waters. Judging from the effect, he used the more lethal Disintegrate Curse, while Professor Flitwick used the simple common spell Expel Your Weapon. Both spells were dodged by the other and the spells struck the ground, kicking up dust. Without a moment's hesitation, the two flipped their wrists and unleashed spells at each other in quick succession. Raven used two split spells and finally used Barrage to launch the stones. Professor Flitwick first used a fire charm, and seeing that it was dodged, he immediately followed it up with a Grow Large charm. Then, he used Water Stream to create a large amount of water vapor at the point where the fire charm landed. Finally, he used a very spectacular polymorph to block the stone that Raven threw at him, while also creating some obstacles for Raven's movement. Everything happened so fast. With the silent spellcasting combined with Professor Flitwick and Raven's high-speed movements, these 4 rounds didn't even take 10 seconds. Merlin, go again. Didn't they just unleash 4 or 5 spells in less than 10 seconds? Ron's eyes widened. He felt he should gouge out his own eyes to see. This was the second time he had actually seen Raven fight seriously. The last time was last semester when Raven fought a giant monster. At that time, Raven used melee combat more often, using a half-finished demon summoning spell to force melee combat and kill the giant. This time, however, Raven primarily used ranged magic. Fragmentation and a barrage of bullets. Professor Flitwick used a fire spell, a water spell, and a polymorph. And I think there's also a spell to instantly grow larger. Hermione frowned, watching Professor Flitwick's every move. Raven used the Wind Fury spell to disperse the water vapor obstructing his view, and also used Transfiguration to block Professor Flitwick's spell. Then, he immediately reversed his grip on his wand, summoning the demon. Since a demon is a creation formed from transformed magic, it possesses the ability to directly attack the vast majority of spells. He charged up to Professor Flitwick in a few steps and swung his sword directly at him. But the next moment, Raven's Knight Demon's attack was blocked, and another blue and white knight blocked Raven's knight. Professor Flitwick also uses the summoning charm. His demon was stronger and taller than Raven's demon and looked more exaggerated. They are stronger and have higher defense in close combat, but are less agile. The two knights quickly grappled with each other, with Raven and Professor Flitwick providing support to their own spirits while attacking each other with other spells. This is the practical use of the summoning charm that Raven mentioned. Harry stared wide-eyed, studying intently. The appearance of the demon's spirits immediately complicated the entire battle. In terms of magic power and combat experience alone, Raven is definitely no match for Professor Flitwick. If it comes to a prolonged battle, Raven will likely be worn down and killed in the end. However, with the addition of the demons, the battle became much more complex. Even Professor Flitwick might make mistakes in such a battle and ultimately fail. The exciting battle quickly drew the attention of all the young wizards. Then Raven used a spell that no one expected. A dragon has emerged from its cave. The summoned snakes did not attack Professor Flitwick. Instead, Raven hid them in a blind spot in the arena. What does this mean? Are they trying to sabotage Professor Flitwick? No, it shouldn't be. I get it. Raven is going to build an army of pythons. What a brilliant idea. Combined with the Whisper of All Beings, this spell will definitely surprise Professor Flitwick. Lee Kyoden shouted excitedly. He's fallen back into his old habit of always wanting to give commentary. Thankfully, Professor Flitwick's protective charm blocked out the young wizards' voices outside. Otherwise, Raven's plan might have been ruined by that shout alone. Too many rules are a major factor that makes duels less exciting. If there were fewer rules, even a dueling tournament between junior wizards wouldn't be so difficult to evaluate. This is why duels between adult wizards are more exciting to watch. Professor Flitwick froze the entire ground, but how is he supposed to? Good heavens, he actually used a levitation charm on himself. I never thought a levitation charm could actually make Professor Flitwick float. Let's see what Raven does. Healing Charm and Barrage. Use the Healing Charm to summon stones to smash the ice, and then use the broken ice shards to unleash a barrage. It saves mana and achieves great results, a brilliant idea. Lee Kyoden's face was flushed as he provided the commentary. The young wizards around them were captivated by the exciting battle and Lee Kyoden's passionate commentary. If they had only learned the basic etiquette of dueling in the previous 2 hours and hadn't really felt the allure of dueling, then they were now truly experiencing the charm of dueling. Ice spikes suddenly protruding from the ground. What kind of spell is this? I've never seen anything like it before. Unfortunately, while Lee Jordan is very eloquent, his academic performance is quite average. There are many spells he doesn't recognize and needs some exceptionally high-achieving junior wizards to remind him. Of course, this also created the effect of having several commentators on site. Percy watched the duel, his face flushed. Is this what a real battle is like? His first thought was whether he should give up becoming Minister of Magic and become an Auror instead. However, although the Aurors have more money, the Minister of Magic has more power. As a member of the Weasley family, Percy understands that sometimes power is more useful than money. At least with power, others wouldn't dare to look down on the Weasley family anymore. Simply having money doesn't guarantee that. Raven was unaware that his training had actually caused Percy to waver slightly in his own ideals. He is now struggling to cope with Professor Flitwick's attacks. The professor is far too experienced. Raven's attacks almost never hit Professor Flitwick, while many of his attack plans were quietly thwarted by Professor Flitwick. Before the Python army plan could even begin, they were all frozen solid by the extreme cold created by Professor Flitwick. Raven would have to waste magic using a fire spell to melt the ice, which would have achieved Professor Flitwick's goal. A proper duel and real combat is like this. You have to amplify your own strengths and your opponent's weaknesses. Raven's close combat skills were superior to Professor Flitwick's, so Professor Flitwick always maintained his distance, preventing Raven from closing the gap and engaging him in close combat. Raven's magic is a weakness, so Professor Flitwick constantly exploits this weakness. They couldn't wait any longer. Raven knew that very well. He rolled away from Professor Flitwick's attack, then struck the ground directly with the tip of his staff. All curses have ended. A tremendous force surged from Raven's body, instantly dispelling the levitation spell Professor Flitwick had cast on him. That wasn't enough. Raven raised his hand and used transfiguration to create two giant hands that firmly bound Professor Flitwick. A bizarre attack him. Upon hearing Raven's words in the whispered language of all living beings, the thawed pythons immediately rushed up the giant hand. However, the next moment, Professor Flitwick shredded both giant hands. Professor Flitwick landed and then planned to use transfiguration to launch a wide-range attack on the python. But Raven did not give Professor Flitwick what he wanted. Oh my god, Professor McGonagall will go crazy if she sees Raven using transfiguration like that. She'll give Hufflepuff a whopping 10,000 points. Ron's mouth was getting dry from reading. That's so cool. I wish I could fight like that too, but he also knew that even Hermione wasn't capable of fighting like that right now. That makes sense. Perhaps next time we should suggest that Professor McGonagall come and take a look. Karen said this. The battle is still ongoing, but it has entered its later stages. Raven finally sees the opportunity to engage in melee. Wait, is that a spear? Raven used transfiguration to make himself a spear. Next up is the melee combat phase. Surprisingly, Professor Flitwick was also quite skilled in close combat, wielding a knight's sword with remarkable dexterity. Cedric wrinkled his nose. I never imagined Professor Flitwick was so skilled with his sword. They're both amazing. Close quarters combat was just as entertaining as the magical battle just now. The two continued their back-and-forth battle. Raven is going to lose. The girl sitting next to Ginny said in a low voice. Her eyes protrude slightly, but overall she isn't ugly. On the contrary, she has an ethereal quality. Why do you say that? Ginny was puzzled. She couldn't see anything wrong with it. At first, she could keep up with the rapid-fire battle, but now she couldn't even see how the two were attacking. Raven is out of magic, but Professor Flitwick clearly still has some left. Sure enough, Raven's face was turning pale rapidly. This is a sign that his magic is about to wane. Once magic power decreases, physical strength will also weaken rapidly. The defeat is inevitable. Raven was quickly defeated. Sigh, he's still at a disadvantage because of his age. If Raven were a bit older, he definitely could have won this fight. It was a pity about Lee Jordan, and the other young wizards also seemed a bit of a disappointment. They could all see that Raven's magic was the main problem. If his magic was sufficient, Raven might not necessarily win, but he could certainly fight Professor Flitwick to a draw. Professor Flitwick conjured a chair for Raven to sit down and rest, while he withdrew his protective charm. Raven's all curses end almost broke through his protective spell, but fortunately his magic was stronger, which allowed him to maintain the protective spell. Seeing the protective spell removed, the young wizards applauded from the bottom of their hearts. The twins pinched their lips and whistled. Don't be discouraged, Raven. You're just at a disadvantage due to your age. Otherwise, Professor Flitwick would definitely not be a match for you. Professor, I want to learn dueling. Professor Flitwick was delighted to see how enthusiastic the young wizards were. It's amazing that so many kids are discovering the charm of dueling. The duel club is right. It was the right thing to let the young wizards watch Raven's training. Professor Flitwick pressed his hand down, signaling the young wizards around him to be quiet. He went up to Raven and recounted the battle to him. First, let's address the biggest problem. Your offensive isn't swift enough. You should use the fewest spells possible to unleash the most powerful attack from the outset. This will compensate for your current weakness in magical power. Raven nodded. The idea of a large number of pythons emerging from their caves to trigger a snake swarm is good, but it's still a bit lacking. Pythons' attacks are limited to the ground. Once they're in the air, this plan will completely fail. Professor Flitwick explained the problem he had just discovered to Raven in detail. This also greatly benefited the other young wizards around them. They had no idea that there were so many areas for improvement in their duel. The duel club was a huge success. Meanwhile, other professors also saw this as a good opportunity. They can work as teaching assistants at the club, while also teaching the young wizards the key points of their courses. In addition to the duel club, the Hogwarts common room is also under construction. Dumbledore decided to use a puzzle game as the access control. The difficulty can be adjusted. When necessary, you can switch to an extremely difficult mode with thousands of colored blocks. If you make a mistake, the 2 stone statues at the entrance will appear, lift you up, and kick you away. Everything is moving in a positive direction. Mrs. Maxim recently lost a necklace. I wonder which mischievous student dared to steal it. Fleur had a bit of a headache because Mrs. Maxim had been in a rather irritable mood lately because of this matter. Of course, it wasn't to the point of losing control. Is it possible for ordinary people to enter Mrs. Maxim's principal's office? That's the problem. Unlike your Hogwarts, our headmaster's office at Beauxbatons doesn't have those weird passwords or anything like that. Almost anyone can go in, so Mrs. Maxim can't narrow down the search area. I see, Raven nodded slightly. Today he has arrived in Beauxbatons. Beauxbatons was a large school, so it wasn't difficult for him to stay unnoticed while following Fleur since there weren't many passers-by around. Let's not talk about that. Although Mrs. Maxim has been a bit irritable lately, it doesn't seem to affect me much. Didn't you say you were writing to the manufacturer the other day? How's it going? Did you find one? Raven opened his satchel with a bitter expression and pulled out a large stack of envelopes. Almost all of them replied to me, saying they wanted to cooperate with me, but they were like jackals, each one more greedy than the last. Dumbledore lied to me, and Merlin's first-class order was utterly useless. Wasn't it agreed that obtaining the level 1 medal would grant more benefits when shopping and negotiating partnerships? Where are the more? These greedy fellows practically wanted to devour him alive. Do you really think he's a child? You think you can buy out his alchemy sandbox for a few hundred galleons? Nerve. I wanted a partnership, I wanted some control over the factory, but these people just offered me a few hundred gallons to get rid of me. I'm already planning to build my own factory. Are you sure you can do it? You're only 12 years old. Of course, I wrote to the Weasleys and the Longbottoms, asking them to help find factories and hire workers. I can oversee things remotely. Are they trustworthy? Come on, these are Weasley and Longbottom. What are you worried about? These 2 families are known throughout the magical world as honest and upright people. That's true. How's that basilisk doing with Mr. Newt lately? It's wonderful. Newt complains to me every day about how pitiful the eyeless basilisk is. Fleur frowned. He accused you. No, I think he also knew that the best solution in that situation was to blind the basilisk first. Besides, the basilisk should pay the price for its mistake. Sparing its life was already a great achievement. Upon hearing this, Fleur snorted coldly. HMPH, he'd better not criticize you. Raven sidled up to Fleur with a sly grin. You're worried about me, Tilda. Rude, I wasn't. Hibiscus pushed Raven's face away with a look of disgust, but the tips of her ears were bright red. With Christmas approaching, Raven has been writing a lot of letters every day lately. Some were letters ordering gifts, and some were replies to the Weasley and Longbottom families. Both families were very concerned about Raven's situation. After all, Raven had saved Ron, Ginny, and even Neville's mother, Alice. Time slips away quietly like this. I'm absolutely furious. Lockhart is such a person. I used to like him so much, and it turns out he's just a thief who steals other people's stories. I really want to beat him up. How could he do this? Ack and Raven walked along, complaining about Lockhart. Lockhart's crimes were finally investigated and exposed, infuriating Ark and Hermione. No wonder Lockhart didn't teach anything useful in class. It wasn't because he wanted to keep the young wizards out of danger. He simply didn't know anything. His most proficient spell is the Oblivion spell. Gilderoy Lockhart is a complete and utterly despicable thief. I'd rather know how he graduated as a Ravenclaw's top student. Quirrell may be a bad guy, but at least he has real talent. Who knows? Oh my god, I'm so angry. I actually told my sister those stories during summer vacation. I almost told them all. 1,000 times I know, Ak. You told me there's nothing you can do about this, right? Come fishing with me, try to distract yourself. Ak nodded somewhat dejectedly. The two walked around the corner and saw a tall man acting suspiciously. He appeared to be desperately trying to shrink his body, but he was a hybrid giant, so even when he bent over and curled up into a ball, he was still quite conspicuous. Hey Hagrid, what are you doing? Oh no, it's nothing. Hagrid straightened up almost instinctively, standing as straight as a child being scolded. Raven raised an eyebrow at Hagrid. You startled me. Oh, it was you guys. Sorry, Raven Acker, I've been a bit too sensitive lately. It's all right, Hagrid. Raven looked at what Hagrid was holding. How to breed a brand new fantastic beast. Hagrid, are you going to breed a new magical beast? No, Okay, I want to hybridize a human-headed sphinx with a scorpion-tailed body and a fire crab. But please don't mention going okay. Raven and Ak nodded. However, what about the sphinx with a human head and a scorpion tail and the fire crab? Why would you want to hybridize these two? They're both uglier than each other and their sizes seem a bit mismatched, don't they? Of course I have my ways. Sorry, Raven Acker, I have to go now. I still have some things to take care of at the cabin. After saying that, Hagrid left the spot and hurried away. What's wrong with Hagrid lately? I always feel like he's distracted. Perhaps it's because he wants to hybridize a sphinx and a fire crab. For Merlin's sake, is it even possible to hybridize these two species? Raven curled his lip. In the face of magic, reproductive isolation is a joke. Let's hope he doesn't create a monster race. Hagrid usually appears very mild-mannered, but he is actually a mad scientist. He often tinkered with these strange and unusual things in his little hut. Christmas finally arrived, much to the delight of all the little wizards. The 2-week holiday has finally arrived. Raven returned home once again. The second brother, Gideon, and the eldest sister, Celine, finally resolved the issues in the United States. They seemed very excited. The situation is much better than we expected. Our operations haven't been hindered by the government there recently. On the contrary, they've been constantly giving us the green light. I know a high-ranking official in the US. They said it's mainly because of Rise. Those guys seem quite wary of Rise's status and abilities. Plus, we did help them a lot and later we even provided some gold. They just gave our family the green light all the way. I'm saying this while sipping my red wine, Seal said. You guys should really see the looks on those guys' faces when they begged for mercy. I laughed so hard I couldn't sleep all night. Mother Cesare slapped Saren on the back of the head. Let's not talk about work now that we're home. Haven't you worked long enough? Let Reese talk about school. Je is going back to school next year too. In fact, Raven had already told his family about what happened at school through the two-way mirror. But since his family wanted to hear it, he decided to tell them. When he mentioned the basilisk, his family gasped in horror once again. Hogwarts is really dangerous. Dumbledore actually told me it was the safest place. Zane frowned deeply. He felt he needed to go to Hogwarts to see it for himself. Was that snake really that big? Like a train? Cesar still couldn't quite believe it. That serpent monster is so big, even a rifle might not be able to kill it. Yes, it could easily swallow me whole if it opened its mouth, but ambushes are still very effective. Normally, it would probably take me a lot of effort to subdue it. That guy's eyes are so deadly, anyone who looks into them is doomed. If it doesn't let its guard down, wouldn't it be invincible? It's not exactly invincible, but anyone who looks into its eyes will die. A poor student was killed and turned into a ghost because he mistakenly looked into its eyes. He's still wandering around in the same spot. Gideon felt that if he had this eye, he would be invincible. Raven then recounted some recent events. For example, he finally decided on the location for the factory, and the half-giant Hagrid recently planned to cultivate a new species from two completely unrelated beings. Cesare was astonished that a wizard could hybridize two completely unrelated species, while Jo was curious about what a sphinx and a fire crab looked like. After dinner, Raven handed Jo a book of magical creatures, and the little girl's face scrunched up as she read it. These two are so ugly, it's hard to imagine how ugly their offspring would be. After dinner, the family sat on the sofa watching TV, and Zane taught Raven a lot about what it takes to manage a company. If Raven doesn't intend to be a hands-off manager and be sidelined by his partner, then he must learn these things. How to communicate with people, how to leave yourself room for maneuver in cooperation, how to manage employees, and most importantly, never overestimate human nature. Their family believes in letting their children bravely venture out into the world. If they get into trouble, then they'll deal with it. Therefore, his family fully agreed with Raven's decision to start his own factory at the age of 12. Raven is very smart. When he encounters something he doesn't understand or only partially understands, he will ask his family for advice and fully absorb their reasonable suggestions. Therefore, they believed that Raven couldn't possibly cause any major disaster. The gift unwrapping session on the second day of Christmas was even more extravagant than last year. Raven received so many gifts that they filled the entire living room. If they were to take them apart one by one, it might take a whole day to finish. Raven could only start by taking apart the more important gifts. Mrs. Weasley also brought Raven some homemade snacks and socks she had sewn herself. Mr. Weasley then sent over a complete set of golf balls made from dragon hides that he had collected. Although Raven didn't need it, he could tell that Mr. Weasley had gone to great lengths to acquire it. The Longbottoms sent Raven a huge pile of precious magical materials that could be used for alchemy or potion making. Raven was sure that some of these materials were something even Snape didn't have. Hibiscus brought Raven a complete set of custom-made white suits. The size fit Raven's body perfectly, and he would look very elegant in them. It's worth mentioning that the Weasleys, Longbottoms, and Fleurs didn't just send gifts to Raven this time. They also sent gifts to Raven's family. What a lovely group of people. Yes, at least they're all very innocent, Zane said, holding up the lighter in his hand. This lighter has a very old-fashioned retro design, but it's very well maintained and doesn't need any refills or alcohol. This is a magic lighter. It was a gift from Mr. Weasley to Zane. I never expected we'd be involved too. Sire Ron and Gideon also received gifts, even though they had never met the Weasleys and had only met the Longbottoms once in the hospital. Zia laughed happily all day long. She hasn't even enrolled in school yet, but she's already received a ton of gifts from the magical world. This made her very happy. While Raven was sorting through the gifts, letters from Harry and the others arrived. In the letter, Harry and Ron stated that Hermione was still determined to interrogate Malfoy. Ron felt it was pointless. After all, the basilisk was already dead, and even if Malfoy did find the diary, so what? Cast a little curse on someone, making them tap dance until they died of exhaustion. Without the basilisk, the diary can do nothing. But ever since Ron secretly told Hermione about the diary, she seems to have been dedicated to finding out whoever got their hands on it again. Harry and Ron couldn't persuade her at all. Now Malfoy, who frequently spreads rumors in Slytherin that the Slytherin heir has not been completely defeated and will definitely return, has become Hermione's prime suspect. She always said this. If Malfoy didn't know or wasn't aware of how the Slytherin heir came to be, how could he dare say that the Slytherin heir hadn't been completely defeated? Despite Harry and Ron's attempts to persuade Hermione that Malfoy was just that kind of person, always spouting nonsense and lying, they were still trying to convince her otherwise. But Hermione remained adamant, insisting on getting information out of him. She simply felt there was something wrong with Malfoy. Ron thought Hermione was just upset by what Malfoy had said earlier. "How are you feeling?" Raven nodded as he walked out. "Spacious, quiet Mr. Weasley, is it really only 1,000 galleons to buy this place?" This place is huge. If Raven turned it into a manor, he could create one that's even more magnificent than Malfoy Manor. Actually, if you're not in a rush, Molly can definitely negotiate a price down to 800 galleons for you. You've never seen anything like it. She haggles like a lioness, enough to paralyze the other person. "Don't tell her I said that, okay, kid?" Raven smiled and nodded. "There's no need to save that money. This is fine. Time is more important." Raven really didn't want to work with other factories anymore. The gift for Harry and Ron was the first edition of the alchemy sand table. However, since there were more than a dozen alchemy sand tables, Raven couldn't make each one by hand. So he selected a few factories and had them produce the parts for each of the dozen or so first edition alchemy sand tables. He assembled the parts himself after they were made. As a result, Raven was nearly driven mad with anger just from the time it took to customize these parts. That damn factory always finds all sorts of strange reasons to ask him for more money. One minute they say the parts are too delicate and you have to pay more. The next minute they say the processing is too difficult and you have to pay more. Once or twice is fine, but if it happens too often, even Raven can't accept it. After this incident, Raven completely abandoned the idea of cooperating with other factories. "Forget it, let's focus on building our own factory. You can never truly rely on others." "That's great. By the way, Raven, regarding the staff, are you sure you want to hire werewolves? I'm not discriminating against them, but it does pose some security risks. If you really hire them, it might be difficult to recruit other ordinary wizards later." "This isn't a question of discrimination. It's simply a matter of stating the facts. Since Raven entrusted this matter to them, they didn't want Raven to cause any trouble because of it later. Werewolves are usually fine, but on the night of a full moon, they can't control themselves. If a normal wizard were to be attacked by one, the wizard's life would be ruined. Therefore, if Raven uses werewolves as employees, he will likely have a hard time recruiting normal wizards in the future. I don't plan to hire ordinary wizards for work anytime soon. Werewolves are cheaper to hire, and I've looked at the information you gave me, their skills are quite good. So why not? Why use more expensive labor when there is cheap labor available? That's a really bad example of being a capitalist. By the way, Mr. Weasley, I've been wanting to ask, where did you find so many werewolves? They're very well hidden. If I were to search for them myself, I'm sure I'd have a very difficult time finding them. Mr. Weasley smiled. This is all thanks to an old friend of ours. He's also a werewolf. He recommended these werewolves to us. He was actually planning to thank you properly. There aren't many people willing to offer werewolves work these days, let alone long-term employment. Werewolves aren't doing so well in the magical world right now. This is also one of the main reasons why Mr. Weasley repeatedly confirmed with Raven whether he really wanted to hire werewolves to work for him. Nothing is more despairing than giving someone hope, and then crushing that hope with your own hands. He didn't want to see Raven summon a large group of werewolves only to abandon them again for various reasons. This isn't good news for the werewolves either. I see. No need for thanks, it's just a matter of mutual benefit. Mr. Weasley smiled and ruffled Raven's white hair. You've done them a huge favor, so it's only right that they're grateful. Mr. Weasley helped Raven sign the contract with the seller. The original seller of this factory was a wizard from Germany. He is selling it cheaply because something happened back home, and he plans to go back to help, so he is in a hurry to sell the factory. Of course, the desire to sell the factory was also partly due to poor management. The factory hadn't generated much value for him, so rather than keeping it afloat, it was better to sell it and cut his losses. The factory is all set up now. Next, I need to meet with the employees before I leave, assign them their tasks, buy all the equipment, and I also need to quickly revise the product design. Raven is quite satisfied with this first version of the alchemy sandbox, but he also knows that his satisfaction may not be what others are satisfied with. The alchemy sandbox needs at least 2 more updates and revisions before it can be officially sold. The next step is to complete the sales procedures and negotiate sales channels. Mr. Weasley thought Raven was working too hard. A 12-year-old shouldn't be so busy every day. But he couldn't convince Raven either, because that's just Raven's habit. He always schedules himself very full for a period of time and then takes a good rest. Okay, I can't argue with you, but you must take good care of yourself, baby. Health is always more important than anything else. I'll contact those werewolf employees for you in the next couple of days, but the official meeting shouldn't be until next week at the earliest. I'll let you know once the time and place are confirmed. Okay, thank you, Mr. Weasley. Don't say that, you've helped our family a lot with several problems. Compared to those you've solved, the help we're offering you now is insignificant. Actually, people don't work during Christmas. But werewolves don't have the concept of taking vacations. Their living conditions are precarious, which is why Mr. Weasley said that the time and place should be finalized next week. Returning home via the fireplace, he is responsible for Newt's two-way mirror vibrations. Newt sent a message to Raven on the 3rd day of Christmas. The somewhat shy old man lavishly praised the creation of the alchemy sand table. He said it was almost like another world he had imagined, a world with even more amazing creatures. He believes the game is currently almost perfect. The only suggestion he could offer was to slightly reduce the difficulty level. The system is excellent, both in terms of forcibly capturing magical creatures using boxes and capturing them peacefully. The only problem is survival. Surviving in this world is a bit too hardcore. Raven's actions in making fire, obtaining food and water, and building shelter are all modeled after those in the real world, making it far too difficult for the character to survive in this world. Newt thinks this is actually quite interesting, but it diverts a large portion of people's attention, making it difficult for them to focus their attention on learning about magical creatures. Raven believed that this issue definitely needed to be addressed, so he made a note of it. Hey Raven, how was your vacation? Great, thank you for your concern. I hope you have a wonderful holiday. After Christmas, Raven boarded the train back to school. 3 days before the start of the school term, Raven met with all the werewolves. They're all very interesting people. Some people become timid and shy due to long periods of hiding, while others become more open during this time. Simply put, some people are like homeless people, while others are like mercenaries. What they have in common is their ability to process and manufacture parts. Raven said things would be less hectic for the next 2 or 3 months. His main task would be collecting the equipment needed for the job. He added that if anyone needed money, they could just ask him. Raven had plenty of gold. He could easily afford to buy all the equipment. For the next 2 or 3 months, salaries will continue to be paid, but employees will need to be available on call. The treatment was so good that the employees suspected something was amiss. It was only after the Weasleys and Grandma Augusta personally vouched for Raven that the werewolf's unease was calmed down. As soon as Raven returned to Hogwarts, he was surrounded by Harry and the others. Raven. How can I tame that Thunderbird peacefully? It's so cool. Enhance the cat cuds. Wait, Raven, can you come with us first? We have something important to tell you. Enhance the cat cuds. All right, that's enough, Ron. Compared to other magical creatures, the cat-like creature is relatively easy to catch. It can't be that strong. Raven raised his hand to stop everyone from talking at once. All right, wait a minute, one at a time. Looks like you've all played with the alchemy sandbox I made. How did it go? Tell me about the pros and cons. Hermione, can we talk about that thing you mentioned later? Don't rush, one at a time. Raven sat down at the long table in Hufflepuff. Harry and Ron chattered on and on about how fun Raven's new game was. Cedric occasionally chimed in with a few words. George and Fred said the only problem with this alchemy sandbox is that it's so addictive that a whole day can pass by in the game without you realizing it. And you don't even realize you haven't eaten anything all day. Raven wrote all of these words down in his notebook. Since Harry and Acker were all young wizards, they were able to accept many of the game's settings more easily and quickly, so they didn't think the survival system was too difficult. Raven summarized it this way. The game currently has many advantages, and the training and capture systems for magical creatures are very interesting. The downsides are that some magical creatures are too difficult to find and catch, and the survival system needs further optimization. The fact that some magical creatures are difficult to find and capture is intentional on Raven and Newt's part. In reality, let alone most magical creatures are hard to find, so this setting is quite necessary. The survival and building systems can be further optimized. Ryan thought it would be more interesting if everyone received a different map. Of course, the alchemy sandbox is already very close to perfect. These problems are not difficult to fix. You can simply use magic to modify the world you created. Just when we thought the alchemy sandbox was over, Professor Kettleburn popped up again. He looked at Raven as if he were some rare treasure, making Raven's scalp tingle. He praised Raven's alchemy sandbox as a groundbreaking work, saying that even he rediscovered the passion of his youth. He has rediscovered the passion he once had for surviving the hardships of the rainforest just to witness a magical animal firsthand. The young wizards were so excited to see Professor Kettleburn for the first time. He was so moved that he shed tears. Raven finally managed to calm Professor Kettleburn down and stop him from crying, but then the professor started saying he wanted to give Raven his money. He said that Raven must have invested a lot in the early stages of making these things, and he had to help him. Otherwise, if such a great work was stillborn due to funding problems, it would truly be a loss for the entire wizarding world. Raven went to great lengths to convince Professor Kettleburn that he genuinely did not need the funding for the time being. Phew, these Fantastic Beasts masters are really enthusiastic. Professor Kettleburn isn't the first master of Fantastic Beasts to offer him money. Newt also said a few days ago that he would give Raven some money. After finally managing to get rid of the topic and send Professor Kettleburn away, the young wizards moved on to the next matter. Raven, we went to get information out of Malfoy at Christmas. Hermione said in a low voice. Raven nodded. Just like in the letters you wrote to me, I know what the outcome will be. Harry and Ron both looked miserable when the topic came up. There was nothing there. Hermione almost drank the polyjuice potion laced with cat hair because of this. Ron only realized it was a cat hair before it completely dissolved, which is why Hermione didn't drink the wrong medicine. Hermione was a little embarrassed when the topic came up. I told you, the body tissues added to the compound decoction must be obtained by hand on site. Otherwise, it's really easy for something to go wrong. Cedric began to speak. He had previously advised Hermione against using this plan as there were too many potential problems. But I got those hairs myself. Yes, you found it yourself on the robe, didn't you? For Merlin's sake, I can't believe someone as clever as you would forget what the most common hair on a cat owner's clothes is. Ouch. Hermione was a little embarrassed and indignant after Ron teased her, so she raised her hand and punched Ron with a hammer. All right, so that's it. It just proves that the person who found the diary wasn't Malfoy. Harry glanced at the Slytherin table, and seeing that no one was there, he spoke up. Actually, we believe it wasn't a Slytherin student who got their hands on the diary again. We got a lot of information out of Malfoy that night, and it seemed that no one in the entire Slytherin class was behaving strangely. Or maybe they always act strangely, so nothing they do now seems so odd. Ron said, rubbing his arm. Okay, do you have any other leads at the moment? The three little ones shook their heads. They spent the entire Christmas holiday only to find a broken lid. The young wizards all sighed in unison. Even Dumbledore had no clue how to find that diary. Sigh, what are peaceful days really like? We're only in our second year and we've already faced a mad defense against the dark arts teacher. A diary that can hide itself and bewitch people. What will happen next? A madman escaping from Azkaban? Ron complained somewhat helplessly. Lockhart was revealed to be a conman who wanted to kill his own student, a revelation that greatly shocked many of his former young wizarding fans. However, what pained everyone even more was that after Lockhart left, defense against the dark arts became a class taught by all the professors in rotation. It's alright at other times, but the most painful time is when Snape substitutes for the class. The guy finally got what he wanted, but that didn't make his attitude any better. During his time teaching, only Raven and Slytherin students were treated somewhat kindly. However, it must be admitted that Snape was indeed quite capable. If he truly unleashes his full potential, he might even become a legendary wizard. I really don't want to admit it, really don't want to admit it, but Snape is definitely much more reliable than Quirrell and Lockhart. Ron's face was scrunched up. He had to try very hard to say those words. I initially thought my mom was joking with me. Harry's expression wasn't much better. He never imagined that Snape was actually such a powerful wizard. After all, Snape would spend his days holed up in his little basement, brewing potions like a cannibalistic wizard. He hadn't quite believed his mother Lily when she told him Snape's magical talent was exceptional. But now that he thought about it, his father James had only given a cold snort and hadn't refuted anything, which was enough to tell the story. Stop talking about him. We're going out for hot pot today. Talking about him is such a spoilsport. Gray said with a smirk. Hot pot has now become a must-eat food for the young wizards every week. However, Hagrid hasn't been letting them into the house to eat lately. Raven and the others guess it's because Hagrid is currently hybridizing a sphinx and a fire crab inside the house. When Raven arrived at Hagrid's hut, he found Hagrid struggling to carry out their large pot. Next to the cabin were some mounds of earth, piled up like small hills. Those were the soil Hagrid had recently dug out while building the basement. Hagrid looks a bit strained right now. Raven waved his wand and the pot floated gently to the surface. Hagrid should actually have his wand reinstated by now, but the Ministry of Magic's efficiency is really questionable. Hagrid, have you been neglecting your exercise lately? I see your belly is starting to show. Hagrid could only laugh awkwardly and scratch his head. He has indeed gained quite a bit of weight recently. Hagrid, a half-giant, already had a large appetite, and with the addition of hot pot broth, he could eat a whole cow every time he ate hot pot. There might indeed have been a slight oversight. How about you come exercise with me every morning? Hagrid waved his hand dismissively at the thought of Raven's training intensity. Raven's training intensity was frightening even to a half-giant like himself. That's insane. Relying on magic and potions to restore his body, he trained like crazy. How was Raven able to catch the quaffle, which was flying like a cannonball, with one hand? It's all about sweat and hard work, no further explanation needed. I'm getting a bit tired of eating beef and lamb hot pot every time. Maybe I should go fishing and make some fish hot pot. Upon hearing this, everyone wore complicated expressions. No offense, Raven, but I feel that if we wait until you catch a fish before we have fish hot pot, we might never get to have it in our lifetime. Raven immediately snapped at Cedric like a little lion with its mane bristling. That's offensive, that's a very serious offense. I'm telling you, I'm sure I can catch fish. If I can't, I'll go swimming in the Black Lake to catch fish. I'm sure I can catch fish. He even got into a fight with those clueless fish. All right, you're the boss, so you get to decide, but your plans will have to be postponed for 2 or 3 months, won't they? It's not a good time to go swimming right now. It's too cold. After finishing their hot pot, the little wizard helped Hagrid clean up the mess. G sounds could be heard from Hagrid's cabin from time to time. Hagrid left all the teeth outside. My God, Hagrid, what kind of hybrids did you create? They're so violent, are they even normal magical creatures? Are you kidding me? They're just normal magical creatures. I followed the instructions exactly as written. Nothing's wrong, it's just occasional. Real? The young wizards didn't really believe it. At least the clanging and G sounds prove that the magical creatures in the cabin are definitely not benevolent. However, as long as Hagrid is happy, He always acts with discretion. He would never create any particularly dangerous magical creatures at Hogwarts. After leaving the hut, the young wizards returned to Hogwarts. As soon as they returned to the castle, Ron started yelling, "Ah, damn it, help me knock that damn thing down." A spider the size of a palm fell from the ceiling and hit Ron squarely in the face. Ron stared at the hairy face and nearly fainted from the blindness. He yelled and sprang up like a spring, then shook his body violently back and forth as if he were tap dancing. Calm down, Ron."
It's escaped.
Ron finally stopped, panting heavily. Good heavens, what's going on with these spiders? Why are they all running into the castle? Kieran watched the dark shadows flashing by in the corner of the shadows on the ground. Even someone like him, who was never afraid of spiders, felt a chill run down his spine. Things have been really strange lately, haven't they? I even found several spiders with webs already spun in our dorm room. Those spiders were almost as big as crabs. Hermione said, patting Ron on the back. There had never been so many spiders in their dormitory before. Raven, however, seemed lost in thought. These spiders had clearly escaped from outside into the castle. Spiders only flee when they are afraid of something. In the original story, the spiders in the castle fled because they were afraid of the basilisk monster inside. They fled into the castle because they were afraid of something outside. Raven doesn't believe there's another basilisk outside the castle for the time being. But what creature are they afraid of now? What could make all these spiders so afraid? To be honest, the range is quite large. Spiders aren't only afraid of snake monsters. Perhaps we can have the professors talk to Pharynx and his group later. It's possible some new ferocious beast has arrived in the Forbidden Forest.
Raven, do you think they were driven into the castle? Raven nodded, agreeing with Cedric.
Spiders rarely migrate their territory in large numbers, but they've now migrated into the castle in a massive wave. This indicates they must have felt threatened for their survival. If they didn't migrate, they would all become extinct. I think the most plausible explanation is that the sudden appearance of a natural predator frightened them. Cedric nodded slightly upon hearing this. Raven's words made a lot of sense. That might really be some new natural enemies of these spiders that have arrived in the Forbidden Forest. Very likely, we should talk to Professor Sprout and the others first.
Go away, don't harm these poor plants. They're not your food.
Professor Sprout was using a large bottle of pesticide to drive away pests on the plants. The arrival of the spiders did not reduce the number of pests here. On the contrary, there are more pests here than before. It seems that many insects, fearing the presence of the Forbidden Forest, also fled into the castle along with the spider. As a result, Professor Sprout's herb garden became a disaster area. Raven and Cedric picked up insecticide and began helping Professor Sprout get rid of the insects. Just as Ryan applied the medicine, a large praying mantis, about the length of an index finger and 3 fingers wide, jumped onto Ryan's arm. Ryan let out a scream like a little girl. Things aren't going well for Ack and his group either. Aphids, caterpillars, even wasps with stingers thicker and sharper than a pen tip. A swarm of insects sent the young wizards scattering everywhere. In the end, it seems that only Raven and Cedric really helped Professor Sprout. Oh my God, be careful, kids. Neville came to help this morning and got stung all over his head by 3 wasps. He's still in the school infirmary. Now I know why Harry and the others couldn't find Neville earlier. The young wizards were chased and harassed by the swarm of insects. The main problem is that the insects in the wizarding world are fed too well. They may not all be unique to the magical world, but the things they eat are definitely related to magic and potions to some extent. As a result, they are generally larger in size and more ferocious. Most importantly, because there are so many insects, using magic spells to repel them is simply impractical. Wide-range spells will inevitably damage herbs, while small-range spells can only be dealt with one by one, making insect repellents more efficient. I really don't know what's gotten into these bugs. So many have suddenly appeared in the last few days. Professor Sprout finally breathed a sigh of relief after managing to drive away a large group of pests. He then took out tea and cookies from his office for the young wizards to eat. We were just about to tell you about this. A lot of spiders and insects have appeared in the castle these past few days. I suspect they all escaped from the Forbidden Forest. Do you think these insects have recently developed natural predators in the Forbidden Forest?
Raven nodded.
But if just one natural enemy can scare them like this, how dangerous must that enemy be? They're acting like they'll be wiped out if they don't run away. Raven wasn't quite sure about this either. In my knowledge base, there are quite a few organisms capable of doing this, but none of them are easy to deal with. That's why we came to you. Perhaps you and other professors could take a look.
Professor Sprout nodded seriously.
I'll talk to the other professors about this later. This can't go on. It would be bad if some poisonous insects hurt the young wizards. Thank you for telling me this. My own little wizard is much more sensible and worry-free. If it were the Gryffindor cubs, they would probably go to the Forbidden Forest to investigate this matter themselves. That's too dangerous. Back in the dorm. Unlike other places, Raven's dormitory was still clean and tidy, with no trace of the insect army. And all of this is thanks to Toast and Starlight. Their fighting power is fiercer than the other. As soon as an insect appears, it is either killed or thrown away by them. I have a feeling that Zinkai must also have special bloodline. Her claws are almost as sharp as an eagle's. Ryan watched Starlight preen its feathers and unconsciously swallowed. He got up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night and saw Zinkai tear a centipede several tens of centimeters long into 5 or 6 pieces with a few swipes of her claws. The key point is that Zinkai didn't eat the prey after cutting it up. She chopped it up and flew back to her shelf. She didn't kill those insects for hunting purposes at all, she just simply didn't like them. Who knows? But thank you to her and Toast for providing us with a safe haven during the insect swarm. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to sleep peacefully every night. Raven picked up Toast, who was lying on his bed, and gently stroked him a few times. I hope the professors can solve this problem quickly. I don't want to have a giant caterpillar crawling on me halfway through a potions class again. In this situation, sticking your neck out will result in one cut, and sticking your neck out will result in another. If you don't flick the caterpillar away, it will crawl everywhere, making people feel uncomfortable and scared. But if they bend down and flick the caterpillars away, Snape will surely find a reason to spray them with poison and then deduct points from their scores. Speaking of potions class, have you finished your potions homework? Raven's words immediately made the young wizard's faces fall. Why would you say such malicious things to a little wizard? There are still 2 days left, so there shouldn't be a rush, right? Raven was fine, he had already finished writing. This assignment Snape gave you is quite difficult. It will take you at least half a day in the library to complete it, so I suggest you postpone tomorrow's plans and finish this assignment first. The young wizards all looked dejected. Meanwhile, the professors also gathered together. The absolute predator of most insects. That could explain why there have been so many bugs suddenly appearing in the castle lately, but there aren't many magical creatures with that ability, are there? Professor Kettleburn gave an affirmative answer to Professor McGonagall's question. It's not that there aren't many, it's that there are very few. The most familiar example of this type of magical creature is the basilisk from a while ago. It had this ability. A magical creature capable of producing this kind of effect would at least be as dangerous as the basilisk. The professors all gasped in shock. There's only one way such a dangerous creature could suddenly appear in the Forbidden Forest, Albus. I know you mean Severus, but I don't think you need to doubt Hagrid at all. While he loves magical creatures, he would never keep such a dangerous one so close to the castle. He knows what he's doing. Snape snorted and then fell silent. Thankfully, he didn't know that Hagrid had acquired a Norwegian Ridgeback last year, otherwise he would definitely have had another argument with Dumbledore. Dumbledore absolutely trusted Hagrid. After all, Hagrid loved that Norwegian Spinosaurus so much last year, yet he still reluctantly let Harry and the others give it away. Hagrid was sensible. Although he loved magical creatures, he knew he absolutely could not keep such dangerous creatures so close to the castle. Moreover, after Christmas, Hagrid stayed in his cabin every day, acting like a mad scientist, and never went out of the castle at all. Where did he get those dangerous magical creatures? Regardless, we have to go to the Forbidden Forest. We need to find out exactly who this or these newcomers are. Professor Flitwick began to speak. Even Aragog doesn't know what went wrong. Perhaps it was that 8-legged beast that did it. Who knows? It's just an 8-eyed giant spider after all. You should let me kill it and take the venom. Snape scoffed. His eyes lit up when he saw the 8-eyed giant spider. The venom of the octopoda is a precious ingredient necessary for making many potions, but because the venom can only be obtained immediately after killing the octopoda, it has always been scarce on the market and is extremely valuable. If Aragog says no, then he definitely didn't do it. Well then tell me, besides it, are there any other more dangerous magical creatures in the Forbidden Forest? All right, Severus, I believe Aragog wouldn't lie about this. At least not in front of Hagrid. Snape snorted and said nothing more. But if we don't even know what Aragog is or where it is, how are we supposed to solve this problem? The professor's original plan was to come to the Forbidden Forest, capture the dangerous magical creature or any of the others, and then send it elsewhere. When they arrived, they searched for a long time but found nothing. Left with no other option, they had Hagrid lead the way to Aragog, the giant 8-eyed spider that Hagrid had once raised. This guy has lived in the Forbidden Forest for decades, and you can get answers to almost anything about it. But when Aragog was asked, he also gave the answer that he knew nothing. It didn't know what it was or where it was located. It only knew that the mere existence of that thing could stir up the fear lurking in their blood. The insects fled simply because they were frightened by the sight, but in reality, they had never even seen the creature. At least Aragog is certain that it, or they, are located in or very close to the Forbidden Forest, Hagrid. I've been troubling you lately. It's all right, Professor Dumbledore, don't worry about it, leave it to me. That guy might be very dangerous, I'm coming with you. Professor Kettleburn said. Back in the headmaster's office, Dumbledore frowned as he looked at the Forbidden Forest in the distance. The diary has not yet been found, and now an unknown, dangerous creature is lurking in the Forbidden Forest. The two things seem related no matter how you look at it. But who actually got their hands on the diary? What dangerous animals did he or she bring to Hogwarts? How did he or she manage to bring those dangerous magical creatures into Hogwarts? If you ask me, why are you so troubled? A good lash out with fire will solve everything. And then accidentally kill all the other creatures living in the Forbidden Forest. You can have them evacuate in advance. You know this won't work. Grindelwald chuckled softly. If I were handling this method would work. Setting excessively high moral standards can always make people feel constrained. Why not talk to that little guy about it? Actually, I've already asked the portrait artist to summon him. Raven quickly arrived at the principal's office. Dumbledore told Raven what had happened. This puzzled Raven as well. I had been thinking it was possible this was related to the diary, but some things don't make sense. If the Christmas diary was manipulating the young wizards to leave Hogwarts, why didn't it hide? Why did it have to return to Hogwarts? Besides, we checked all the young wizards who left the school, and they all had no problems. How did the diary manage to get away with it? I don't know how he managed to keep it from us, but I roughly understand why he didn't leave Hogwarts. Perhaps it's due to Tom's personality. Miss Weasley said the diary claimed to be Tom Riddle, but as far as I know, Tom stopped using that name shortly after graduating. This means the fragments of the soul in that diary must have separated from Tom when he was younger, and in his youth, Tom's personality was far more persistent than it is now. Simply put, this guy is too young and narrow-minded, so he's not planning to use a safer method, right? In fact, there might be some sense of responsibility behind his actions. Sense of responsibility. Talking about responsibility with Voldemort, Raven raised an eyebrow, and after a moment's thought, he understood what Dumbledore meant. He's basically just Tom Riddle from the diary, a Chunabiu, delusional and single-minded character. He believed that Salazar Slytherin hated all students born into Muggle families, so he now not only planned to resurrect them, but also to clean up Hogwarts. Could someone be that stupid? He could have easily resurrected by hiding and keeping a low profile. But instead, he insisted on going back to Hogwarts and causing trouble right under Dumbledore's nose while being resurrected. Someone who spends their entire life pursuing immortality and believes that nothing else matters but immortality. Can you expect them to be very intelligent when they were young? Grindelwald gave a sarcastic smile. He's nothing but a fool with powerful magic. It's normal for him to do stupid things. All right, none of that matters. The most important thing now is how to find it and how to figure out where that dangerous magical creature is. Raven nodded and thought for a moment. Now that the diary is at Hogwarts, and we've acquired a new, dangerous magical creature, it's bound to attack again. I can't think of a good solution for now. We can only wait and see if we can catch it when it makes a mistake. There's no way around it. It's possible that everyone who had the diary has already been checked, and even Dumbledore didn't find anything wrong. The existing clues are really too few. By the way, Professor, did you check on Hagrid? Judging from the escape routes of those insects, Hagrid is highly suspicious. But Dumbledore shook his head. It wasn't Hagrid, I checked his memory, there's nothing wrong with it. Hagrid just fiddled with his frizzy-tailed snails in his hut and did nothing else. That's really... Hagrid's blast-tailed snails weren't capable of scaring away so many insects. Raven sighed softly. Ultimately, it comes down to a lack of clues. We can only wait for Tom Riddle to make his move. By the way, professors, have you found the location of the secret room? Of course, right there in a girl's restroom, the basilisk has already told us everything. Is there anything left inside? Are you curious? Of course, that's a secret chamber left behind by Slytherin. Only his successor can open it. Dumbledore smiled and shook his head. I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. When we went in, we found nothing there. The basilisk said he used to live there, and there were once several of Salazar Slytherin's notebooks there, but Voldemort took them. Now there's nothing there. Raven was a little disappointed. The notebook of one of the four giants must contain a lot of ancient and interesting knowledge. However, I don't think you need to be so disappointed. The basilisk told us that, strictly speaking, that place isn't exactly the ancestral home of Slytherin. Not the place of inheritance. Dumbledore nodded. Actually, it was a security department left by Slytherin for Hogwarts. In case of danger, Slytherin hoped his successor could open the Chamber of Secrets and release the basilisk to protect Hogwarts. Raven frowned immediately. So Voldemort was terribly wrong. I think the child not only mistakenly believed that Slytherin hated all Muggle wizards, but also mistakenly believed that the Chamber of Secrets was the only remaining legacy of Slytherin. Wow, this is getting interesting. Did the basilisk say where the true Slytherin lineage was located? Dumbledore smiled and shook his head. I know what you're thinking, Raven, but I'm sorry, the basilisk doesn't know where the true location of the legacy is either. If you want to inherit the legacy left by Slytherin, you'll probably have to rely on yourself. Yes, let's make 18 sets first. Send them to me when they're done. Also, have you selected people for the sales department? We need to be out there looking for partners by this summer at the latest. The young masters have been chosen, 12 in total. Everyone is ready, but are you sure our identities won't prevent us from reaching an agreement? On the other side of the two-way mirror, a woman who looked rather strong spoke with some concern. Her face had 3 hideous claw marks, and her arms and other exposed skin were covered with all sorts of scars. Don't worry, if we reach an agreement, everyone's happy, a win-win situation for both of us. If we don't, I have a backup plan. We don't need to cooperate with a bunch of muddle-headed people. If this group of people chooses not to cooperate with a business that is clearly about making money, simply because one of their employees is a werewolf, then Raven believes there is indeed no need to cooperate with such people. Raven certainly didn't care whether others were racist or not, or whether they discriminated against him or his family and friends. He didn't care what others did or what they wanted to do, but merchants should prioritize profit. If a businessman rejects a deal that is almost guaranteed to make a profit simply because of his own likes or dislikes, then that businessman is definitely unqualified. Even if you manage to reach a cooperation agreement with these kinds of people, the cooperation won't last long. Raven couldn't believe that such a large wizarding world couldn't possibly lack a single businessman with a normal head. Even if the worst-case scenario occurs and the wizarding world truly lacks any sane businessmen, he can still continue to push forward with his plan. Many of his friends own shops, so he could easily solve the problem by asking them for help. Alright, remember to let everyone get a hands-on experience to avoid problems when we start assembly line production. Also, make sure to buy all the machines on time and let me know if there are any issues. Yes, young master. After finishing his conversation with his men, Raven put away the two-way mirror. He has too many two-way mirrors now. Luckily, Raven has a good memory and each two-way mirror looks different from the others. Otherwise, Raven would have to label all of them. For Merlin's sake, Raven, couldn't you increase the capture rate of the Thunderbird? It's impossible to catch this Thunderbird. I've ambushed it from behind at least 200 times with the box. Actually, you can get it earlier through peaceful means. I learned about fantastic beast nutrition in the game and then fed the same Thunderbird for a whole week. It's now in my team. But you can't make magical creatures obtained peacefully do too much work. Otherwise, they'll go berserk and run away. Harry scratched his face. But I think it's fine. Having a Thunderbird that only requires a little power each day is enough for me. In the game world, Ron is more like a capitalist, while Harry is more like a kind zookeeper. Raven smiled and shook his head. They had originally found an empty classroom today to study, because Hermione had once again entered her annual pre-exam review mode. But Harry and Ron got tired of studying after a while and used rest as an excuse to play games. Raven had just had a short meeting with his employees, so he didn't have time to study. As a result, Hermione was the only one studying diligently in the entire empty classroom. You should start studying. Your rest time is almost catching up with your study time. Ron shrank back. He didn't want to study. Who would start studying 3 months before the exam? Can this be called reviewing? They haven't even finished their classes yet. There's a lot of knowledge they need to learn and preview in advance. Raven didn't study at all. All of them, Raven doesn't need to study at all. He got a perfect score because that was the highest possible score on the test. Are you even comparing yourself to him? Ron pursed his lips and remained silent. He had to admit Hermione was right. Raven never needed to study. Comparisons are odious. With no other option, under Hermione's pressure, Ron and Harry reluctantly put the game's sandbox aside and began to seriously review their lessons again. Honestly, starting to review now is a bit early.
Raven spoke the truth, but Hermione disagreed. It's definitely too early for you, but I think it's just right for us. Any later and we won't be able to fully review all the knowledge points for all subjects. Hermione's review process was essentially a complete relearning of the subject, which is why it took her so much time. Let's not talk about that anymore. I need to rest for a bit before getting back to studying. By the way, Raven, have you named your game yet, or are you just going to call it Alchemy Sandbox? Raven said as he pulled a notebook from his crossbody bag. Regarding this, I'm actually debating whether to name the game Fantastic Beasts and where to find them. The name fits the current game content, but as you know, using that name might seem like riding on Newt's coattails, so I'm still undecided. Hermione, however, didn't see anything wrong with riding the coattails of someone else's popularity. Wouldn't it be alright to get Mr. Scamander's permission? His permission shouldn't be hard to get. I'll just ask him and there's a good chance he'll agree. I'll think about it some more. If I don't have a better idea, I'll just use this name. Raven plans to turn the Alchemy Sandbox into a platform where other games can also be loaded. Therefore, it is necessary to distinguish between the game's name and the name, Alchemy Sandbox. This game is sure to be a huge hit. It allows players to learn while having fun, and little wizards will absolutely love it. Even though the knowledge in the game is not comprehensive, and much of it was created out of thin air by Raven and Newt, the game still contains a wealth of accurate information that can greatly pique the player's interest. Even Hermione herself enjoys this game, but she has stronger self-control, so she doesn't seem to take out the Alchemy Sandbox to play all the time. To be honest, Hermione is probably the best player in the game so far. She has acquired most of the magical creatures in the game and built comfortable and reasonable living areas for each of them in her chest. I also hope it sells well, or at least that I don't lose everything. This is my first time doing business, and if I lose too much on my first try, I might be very hesitant to do business again. It will definitely succeed. Hermione was quite certain of this. Even someone who rarely plays games really liked this game made by Raven, so I'm sure others will like it too. There's nothing else going on for now. Raven can finally free up some time to study the Slytherin legacy. He didn't particularly crave power, but it was, after all, the legacy of Slytherin. According to the Basilisk, Voldemort was not even qualified to inherit Slytherin's true legacy. Normally, Voldemort wouldn't even be able to get past the Basilisk. If it weren't for Parseltongue, the Basilisk wouldn't obey Voldemort's orders. The true legacy of Slytherin, the other founders must have left behind real legacies too, right? There's no basis for this guess, but Raven just has this intuition. He didn't believe that the four giants ultimately left behind only a basilisk, a sword, a golden cup, a crown, and a hat. They must have left behind other legacies, Raven thought. But how do we find those traditions? Many of the first-year students are curious about the ancient castle of Hogwarts and try their best to uncover the secrets hidden within it. Raven wasn't very interested at the time, so he didn't join in the effort to uncover the castle's secrets. But now Raven is interested, searching for the possible legacy left by the Big Four. SHH, keep your voice down, Ryan. I don't want the team to grow to hundreds of people before we even start looking for clues. Uncovering secrets is never a solitary endeavor. A team can achieve twice the results with half the effort. What's the basis for that? I mean, we've been at school for almost 2 years, but we've never heard of the four giants leaving behind any legacy. To correct you, we just haven't heard of any legacy left by the other 3 founders, but we've personally witnessed the legacy left by Slytherin.
I found it strange.
Haven't people been talking about the treasures left behind by the Big Four lately? I've heard at least a dozen stories. Hufflepuff's mysterious herb garden, Hufflepuff's delicious kitchen, Ravenclaw's library, Ravenclaw's well of wisdom, Gryffindor's dueling arena, Gryffindor's wine cellar.
Karen shook his head.
Those are all just tall tales and nonsense made up by young wizards. Only the legend of Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets has existed from the very beginning. It has been circulating at Hogwarts for a very, very long time. Aside from Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets, the mystery rooms left by Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Gryffindor are all recent discoveries. Obviously, that was just the little wizards bragging. But regardless, Slytherin truly does have a legacy, doesn't it, Raven?
Yes, this message is absolutely reliable.
The Basilisk said that Slytherin still has a true heritage site in the castle, so this matter is almost certainly true.
I think we should start searching around the area near the secret room.
Dumbledore revealed the Chamber of Secrets in Slytherin, and it has now become a new popular spot for young wizards to visit.
I'm pretty sure it's not around the secret room.
Raven had a different opinion.
If the true legacy left by Slytherin lies near the Chamber of Secrets, then the basilisk would surely have found that location over the long course of time. Even if the true site of the lineage were connected by sewers, the basilisk couldn't possibly be completely unaware of it. That's a basilisk that's lived for over 100 years and has an excellent understanding of the Hogwarts sewer system. All it knew was that it existed and nothing else. Raven believed that the real treasure left by Slytherin was definitely not near the Chamber of Secrets. Anyway, we have to start looking. Maybe we'll find it and then we'll be the true heirs of Slytherin. Let's see how those arrogant Slytherins will act then. Gray and his team seemed very motivated, but that fighting spirit was quickly extinguished. After searching for the treasure for 2 weeks without success, Gray and his companions gradually lost their fighting spirit. There was nothing they could do, they were just a bunch of badger pups. Not everyone is Hermione, a Gryffindor lion cub who can spend countless hours on tedious research. In the end, only Raven continued the investigation to find out where the real Slytherin treasure was located. Hogwarts ghost stories from a century ago, why have you been reading these books lately? Cedric was somewhat puzzled. He came to return the book on the history of magic he had borrowed, only to find Raven engrossed in reading a thick book of ghost stories. This wasn't the first time he'd seen Raven reading this kind of book. Just a few days ago, Raven was reading Legends from 500 years ago, which is also a book of supernatural tales. It's not very informative, but it's entertaining, and the stories are all quite well crafted. I still want to see if Hogwarts has any other secret rooms. You haven't given up yet. Come to think of it, you've been investigating for almost 3 weeks now, right? Less than 3 weeks, just over 2 weeks. Over the past 2 weeks, Raven has been researching everything from verifiable history to unofficial historical accounts, and finally to legends and supernatural tales. Did you find anything? Of course, nothing was found. These stories have many logical flaws and many don't even need to be verified. For example, there's a legend that Slytherin once took in a kind student, only to use the student for human experimentation. Cedric was somewhat puzzled. Is there any obvious logical flaw in this? I remember Slytherin did conduct human experiments. According to the history of magic, Slytherin did indeed conduct human experiments on living people, a fact that has been documented at length in the history of magic. But he only ever used his enemies for human experimentation. Think about it for a moment and you'll understand. Slytherin may be cruel, but he would never be cruel to his own people. He would never lay a hand on his own students. Cedric thought for a moment. That's true. Historically, all those Slytherin used for human experiments were people who had offended or were enemies of Slytherin. Slytherin never showed his cruel side to his friends. Even though he later had a fight with the Gryffindors, he only argued with them and didn't actually lay a hand on them. Okay, it seems this legend has quite a few flaws. Yes, most legends about Slytherin tend to portray him as a sinister, mean, cold-blooded, hook-nosed, gloomy wizard who spends his days staring at children with his drowned corpse-like eyes, ready to snatch and devour them. The fabrication is so blatant that these legends sound full of holes. If Slytherin were truly that despicable, how could the Gryffindors, with their overflowing sense of justice, possibly remain friends with him? It's a miracle the Slytherins didn't die from a single stab, they were just quick to escape. So you're still not planning to give up. These legends are even more chaotic than unofficial histories. They probably won't help you, will they? Raven turned the last page, closed the book and said, "Watching is better than not watching." It wasn't much better though. Time slowly marches towards the end of the semester. The weather is getting hotter every day. Everything seemed to have returned to calm. The person who found the diary did not launch another attack, and Dumbledore finalized the location of the Hogwarts common room. Everything seemed to be moving in a direction of calm. But the persistent insect infestation in the castle kept reminding Raven that the matter of the diary was not yet over. Finally today, while Raven was grooming the unicorn, another piece of bad news arrived. For Merlin's sake, wasn't it said there was only one basilisk in the castle? What a joke. Ryan looked furious. Karen and Gray are the same. Because the victim this time, the person lying in bed, is Ack. Raven stood by Ack's bedside, his expression indifferent, lost in thought. "I'm sorry, children, I understand how you feel, but you must leave now." "Don't worry, this child will be cured soon." Raven's spell made most potions no longer scarce, so curing Akali at this moment wouldn't be too difficult. Even after leaving the school clinic, everyone was still angry, except for Raven, who remained silent throughout. Ack's injuries this time were quite severe. Multiple ribs fractured, numerous blood vessels ruptured. That basilisk clearly came with the intention of killing Ack. The petrified wizard was immune to the basilisk's instant death ability, so the basilisk intended to kill Ak by brute force. However, the professor arrived in time, so it didn't succeed. Violent, bloodthirsty, and utterly unprincipled, this serpent monster is more dangerous than the previous one. What do we do now? The professors couldn't even catch that basilisk monster. Kieran and the others all looked at Raven. If there's a young wizard who can solve problems that even the professors can't, then that person is Raven. I will kill that basilisk monster. No doubt, no hesitation. This serpent monster has crossed the line. The previous basilisk didn't have the heart to kill, so Raven spared its life instead of killing it immediately. But this one is different. This serpent monster revealed its murderous intent. This time there will be no chance of it surviving Raven's attack. I'm going to find Dumbledore. You don't need to worry about this. Raven turned to leave, but Ryan stopped him. Hey, don't try to do everything yourself. We can help you too. Ak is our friend. Raven glanced at Ryan, then at the others behind him, and nodded slightly. I'll come to you for help if there's anything you can do to assist me. Separated from the main group, Raven went to the principal's office. I have only one question now, Professor Dumbledore. How could you let it slip away right under your noses? Raven's expression remained calm, but Dumbledore saw a sharp edge in those scarlet eyes. It used a shrinking charm to escape into the sewers. You know, Hogwarts' sewer system is very complex, like a maze. It's the sewer system again, haven't you learned your lesson yet? The last serpent monster used the sewer system to roam freely, appearing and disappearing unpredictably. How can this serpent monster still use the sewer system? You can't fall in the same place twice, can you? I understand what you mean, Raven. I'm sorry, but the sewer system's defenses aren't finished yet. Hogwarts' sewer system is so vast and complex that installing a defense system on the entire system would be a massive undertaking. Dumbledore has learned from his previous experience, but the defense system is not yet fully in place. So what's next? This newborn basilisk is even more dangerous, even more bloodthirsty. It has no bottom line. This time Ak was lucky that the professor arrived in time, but what about next time? If you ask me, burning that forest to the ground would solve everything. Grindelwald came down from the second floor of the principal's office. For once, Dumbledore was seriously considering Grindelwald's suggestion. He's not stupid. The child's severe injuries demonstrated that this newly appeared serpent monster had no moral boundaries. Its sole purpose in existing and acting was to kill. Such a creature is far too dangerous. It must not be given any further opportunity to attack people. If there's truly no other way, this will be our last resort. Grindelwald's methods were cruel and unpredictable, but it must be said that they were the simplest and most direct. It is currently known that the basilisk is hiding in or near the Forbidden Forest. So if a fiery blaze is used, even if the basilisk doesn't die, finding it will become much easier. But doing so would destroy the entire Forbidden Forest. In the meantime, we should quickly complete the Hogwarts common room and then build a Hogwarts dormitory so that the young wizards can rest together as much as possible. This way, the young wizards would always be in groups when going to and from get out of class, and they would be able to put up a fight against the basilisk. Professor Flitwick's dueling club has been thriving lately, and many young wizards have improved their combat skills considerably. If they were to encounter the basilisk, they would all be able to put up a fight as long as they weren't alone. Then perhaps you should adjust the course schedule, and also play rooster crowing sounds on campus every day. Dumbledore nodded. Yes, it's necessary. Perhaps I should try to make the classes larger, but playing rooster crows probably won't work. That basilisk doesn't look like it would be afraid of a rooster's crow. Why do you say that? This basilisk has a rooster's comb. I think Tom must have modified it. Yeah. Then let the professors think about these things. Raven got up to leave, but Dumbledore called him back. Raven, I'm sorry, but I must warn you, don't actively seek out that guy alone. You are very powerful, but this new basilisk is clearly more dangerous than the previous one. Raven turned his head slightly. Don't worry, Professor, I won't put myself in danger. As long as the danger can be resolved, Raven won't be considered to be in real danger. This new basilisk monster completely ignited Raven's murderous intent. Since Tom Riddle wanted to play, he would play along. If Tom Riddle had hidden himself and slowly absorbed life energy to revive in the shadows, Raven wouldn't have been able to find him. But now cat-catching mouse has. Who will be the cat and who will be the mouse? Raven narrowed his eyes slightly and slowly walked into the shadows of the corridor. Tom Riddle was unaware that he had provoked Raven's anger. He was still engrossed in his perfectly devised plan to keep things under wraps. This time he was much more cautious than before, ensuring that even if Dumbledore used legilimency to its fullest extent, he wouldn't be able to find him. Salazar Slytherin's mission will ultimately be completed by him. No one can stop him, even Dumbledore wouldn't do. What are you doing, little cowboy? A new spell. Furong rolled her eyes. Of course I know it's a new spell, but what kind of spell is it? What type is it? Raven kept using his wand to draw words out of the notebook. It's a support spell that expands my listening range for a certain type of creature. You're going to use this to catch the new basilisk monster that's appeared here. Yes, with this spell, I'll hear it the moment it dares to enter the castle. Lei Wenchun had previously been too lazy to bother with this matter. He felt that Tom Riddle in his teenage years couldn't possibly cause any trouble. He truly hadn't expected that Tom Riddle would actually learn how to create the basilisk. The basilisk, a dangerous and dark creature, has a seemingly simple method of creation. The demon egg is laid by a 7-year-old rooster when Sirius is in the sky, and then given to a toad to incubate it to hatch the basilisk monster. It sounds simple, but in reality there are quite a few problems hidden in these simple steps. How can a rooster lay eggs, and how can a toad incubate them? When is Sirius considered to be in the middle of the sky? These are all problems. It's clear that hatching a basilisk is no easy task. Moreover, Raven had previously thought that even if Tom Riddle hatched a second basilisk, it would be useless since the basilisk wouldn't grow up quickly enough. Who would have thought that Tom Riddle, in his Chunibyu middle school syndrome phase, not only hatched a second basilisk, but also found a way to prematurely mature it and modify it, making it grow to the width of a small car shortly after birth. Maybe you could call me along this time. I'm sure I'm a much stronger fighter than that little boy you rescued last time. Raven raised an eyebrow. You want to see that basilisk monster? Nobody would want to, would they? Furong didn't think anything would happen if she faced the basilisk Raven. The last basilisk monster was as big as a train, but Raven still easily subdued it. This newborn basilisk is only about the size of a small car at its largest. Raven could easily subdue it. Of course, although Hibiscus knew that Raven would definitely be all right, she still had some worries. That's why she asked Raven if they found the other person, she would rush over to help immediately. On one hand, she genuinely wanted to see the basilisk in person. On the other hand, witnessing Raven safely kill it would alleviate her worries. I'm sorry, Hibiscus, I can agree to many things, but not this one. A bloodthirsty serpent monster is too dangerous, and I really don't want you to take this unnecessary risk. Perhaps you could look through the two-way mirror. What do you think? The non-bloodthirsty basilisk could be easily subdued by a few 4th or 5th grade wizards working together. But the bloodthirsty basilisk is different. A bloodthirsty, murderous basilisk is far beyond the capabilities of a mere wizard. Raven is ultimately special. However, Fleur insisted on coming to help, and Raven realized that Fleur was just unable to suppress her worries about him, so he finally agreed to Fleur's idea. But be very careful and remember to stay far away. Also, if I tell you not to open your eyes, then you absolutely must not open your eyes. Certainly. The topic of the basilisk monster quickly passed, because Raven had already prepared the spell. Speaking of spells, Hibiscus's improvements to the Soul Ice spell have also come to an end. While her talent in spell creation may not be as great as Raven's, she is still considered a genius. By the way, did Gabrielle like her Christmas present? Like I told you before, she absolutely loves that game, you know. She used to tell us she wanted to be a brave Auror, but your game changed her dreams. Now she wants to be an excellent magical creature keeper. Raven chuckled softly. On the Muggle side, many kids want to be artists, scientists, or astronauts before they grow up, but only a few stick to their dreams. The vast majority just haven't figured out what they really want yet. Regarding this, I think she seems quite serious about it. At least she's already read through all the magical creatures protection books I left behind, and she's reading them a second time. Excellent execution. I still believe she won't be like that when she grows up. But even if she really wants to become an excellent magic animal breeder, that's great, isn't it? I don't see what's so good about it. You should add a sense of smell, pain, and fatigue to your game, so Gabriel can understand just how tiring and painful it is to raise magical creatures. Raven smiled helplessly and shook his head. The Furong family is considered a relatively strict family. While being a zookeeper for magical creatures is a high-paying job with plenty of vacation time and little competition, it is also dangerous, requiring you to deal with smelly magical creatures every day. This is definitely not the best job option for Gabrielle's family, so unless Gabrielle shows a strong desire to do it after she grows up, they will not easily agree to let her do this job. I make alchemy sandboxes to sell to young wizards as toys, not to the Ministry of Magic to use as prisons to torture criminals. If you're going to torture criminals, then I think you probably need to improve. Believe me, I know all too well how to torture criminals. There are still dozens of Death Eaters trapped inside the Soul Curse. They've even forgotten how to cry now, but Raven can still make them wail. Raven knew all too well how to destroy a person both psychologically and physically. I warned you before that you should be careful not to let Gabrielle become addicted. And I took your advice, telling Gabrielle not to play for too long in one day when we received the gifts. However, she still got completely absorbed in it. It's not her fault. Your game is indeed very fun. For this day and age, this game is groundbreaking. Even Muggle computer games aren't this fun. Let alone young wizards who haven't even reached adulthood, even adult wizards could easily become addicted to this game. Raven had anticipated this, which is why he included a more realistic learning system in the game. In the game, players can truly learn valuable knowledge, including but not limited to wilderness survival skills, skills for fighting common magical creatures, essential knowledge about raising magical creatures, botany, and more. This knowledge would be dry and boring if written in a book, but when Raven and Newt organized it and put it in a game, it became easy for people to remember. Combining theory and practice is always the best way to learn. As long as the child can learn real knowledge from the game, a little addiction won't be a big problem. That serpent monster looked very violent. I tried to run away with my eyes closed, but it didn't work. My spells had no effect on it at all. On his hospital bed, Ak, who had almost fully recovered, was describing the events of that night to everyone. Ak stayed up a little late that night doing his homework, but not too late, as many other students were also catching up on their assignments at that time. There weren't many Hufflepuff students catching up on their homework at the time, so after finishing his assignment, Ak didn't wait for the others to go back to the dormitory together, but went back to the dormitory alone. On his way back to the dormitory, he heard a whimpering sound at the end of the corridor, which sounded like someone was crying. A little curious, Ak went over without thinking too much about it. And just like that, they bumped right into that guy. Fortunately, the basilisk was initially facing away from Ak, otherwise Ak wouldn't have even had a chance to close his eyes. Upon realizing he had encountered a basilisk, Ak didn't stand there frozen in place. Instead, he immediately turned and ran away. But because he was running with his eyes closed, he stumbled and wasn't fast enough. The basilisk quickly caught up with him and rammed him away with its car-like body. What happened next is quite clear. After being knocked away by the basilisk, Ak panicked and saw a reflection in the window, which turned him to stone. Just as the basilisk coiled around the petrified Ak and was about to bite Ak's head, Professor Sprout arrived in time and used a spell to shrink the basilisk and make it escape into the sewers. Fortunately, the basilisk didn't bite Acker first. Otherwise, given the basilisk's venom, Acker might not have survived until Professor Sprout took him to the school infirmary. By the way, I noticed that guy had a huge comb on his head, something that the old snake monster didn't have. That old serpent monster certainly didn't have such a thing. Did you see anything else different, Ak? Ak racked his brains and thought about it. Its skin scales look a lot like feathers and its sound isn't always a hissing sound. It seems to make a clucking sound every now and then. After getting a general idea of what was going on, Raven followed Dumbledore to the school infirmary, leaving Ryan and the others inside to talk to Ak. Ak didn't see anyone controlling the basilisk from beginning to end, which means that the shrinking ability is at least part of the newborn basilisk's own power. A rooster's comb feathers. It seems the genius senior really did incorporate Birdsnake and a lot of rooster genes into the basilisk this time. At least his abilities are indeed outstanding. Feathers, able to freely change their body size without the aid of magic, are clearly the abilities of the Birdsnake. The extra comb on its head and the occasional clucking sounds from its throat indicate that it has more rooster blood in its body. It seems the rooster's crowing really has no effect on it anymore. Is it possible for a living being to be completely without weaknesses, Professor? Dumbledore shook his head. At least to the best of my knowledge, no living thing is completely without weaknesses. They will always have at least one weakness or natural enemy. Is that so? But understanding this still doesn't really help. They currently have no way of figuring out what the newborn basilisk's weaknesses are. Before its weaknesses are revealed, the newly born basilisk has no weaknesses. It can change its body size at will, is highly immune to the sound of a rooster crowing, and is bloodthirsty. I'll have everyone try to travel in groups later. This basilisk is too dangerous. Raven, please don't act rashly, okay? This situation has spiraled out of Dumbledore's control. If Raven were to act rashly, Dumbledore couldn't guarantee that Raven wouldn't get into trouble. Don't worry, Professor, I never do anything unprepared. He will definitely be prepared to kill that snake monster again. As it stands, this newborn serpent monster is still unable to break free from the barrier of light and shadow. This spell is arguably the strongest spell Raven has ever created. In terms of control, as long as the surrounding environment isn't completely dark, Raven can control his opponent at will. Even if the basilisk shrunk to the size of a grain of rice, it still couldn't escape. In combat, if there is sufficient ambient light, Raven can slowly kill the basilisk, leaving it utterly helpless. In fact, as things stand, Raven doesn't need to prepare anything more. But Raven continued to prepare. He will make Tom Riddle and his basilisk suffer a terrible death. After Dumbledore left, Grindelwald emerged from the shadows and came to Raven's side. Your spell is perfectly capable of killing that serpent monster.
I know.
Grindelwald smirked, you are very cautious. This is the knowledge you taught me, caution is always a good thing. Grindelwald chuckled a few times, then patted Raven on the shoulder. When the time is right, we'll act. Don't listen to that old man, young people need to be energetic to be young. After saying that, he left the spot. Grindelwald was always more aggressive than Dumbledore. At dinner, Dumbledore announced the upcoming arrangements. First, the Hogwarts Common Room has been built, along with the Hogwarts Common Dormitories. These two places are really big. Dumbledore built this place on the second floor of Hogwarts. The entrance uses a fun random matching game as the first challenge, and two somewhat intelligent stone beasts as the second challenge. The common rooms and dormitories could comfortably accommodate all the teachers and students of Hogwarts. Dumbledore used the invisible extension charm and Raven's stabilizing charm, and even added some of his own methods, to ensure that the place was absolutely safe and spacious enough. From then until the end of the term, the young wizards will rest together in the Hogwarts dormitories, minimizing the number of times they go out alone. Secondly, the timetable has been adjusted. Thanks to Dumbledore's careful planning, younger wizards will now inevitably encounter older students on their way to and from get out of class. Finally, effort should be intensified to prohibit nighttime outings. This time it's for real. Even the Weasley twins could sense that Dumbledore was absolutely serious this time. Dumbledore knew all too well about the previous nighttime excursions to Hogwarts. Previously, this was because the young wizards never encountered any danger when they went out at night. But this time, it's different. Even the most casual nighttime strolls could cost the young wizards their lives. Therefore, Dumbledore is serious about controlling nighttime outings this time. He implemented a daily evening attendance system. If someone was not in the lounge when they were supposed to be present, the professors would immediately search the entire castle for them. Even after the turn is over, the young wizards are not allowed to sneak out of the common room. The two stone beasts will strictly supervise them. This feeling of being deprived of freedom made the twins and many other young wizards who like to wander at night very uncomfortable. But they also knew it was necessary, so they didn't say much, only praying that the damned basilisk would be caught quickly. The good news is that the Hogwarts common rooms are really big, and it's quite lively with everyone resting together. Raven chatted with his family about recent events. We bought you a batch of hand grenades. Your dad is planning to visit you at Hogwarts next week and will bring them over. Thessalonians refused to believe it. Could there really be carbon-based life forms that weren't afraid of firearms? I refused to believe that Snake could escape unscathed after swallowing a grenade. Raven was both amused and exasperated. I can handle it without grenades. Nonsense, a snake the size of a small car and possibly even bigger. You're only 12, let me think. You might need an automatic rifle and Molotov cocktails. His mother wanted him to conquer the entire Hogwarts. Okay, Mom, don't worry so much. Everything is under control. When is Dad coming next week? Next Tuesday. Your father has been going out drinking with Mr. Weasley every day lately, so Mr. Weasley will probably be taking him to your school. Raven nodded. What is Zia doing? Her. She's playing with Orange. That little girl has been neglecting her studies lately. Mrs. Cyril just told me about her studies yesterday. It's a complete mess. I think she's more like your older sister or brother when it comes to studying than you. Raven smiled. J's academic performance was originally only barely average, but after she learned that she was a wizard, she couldn't even manage to be average anymore. Anyway, she doesn't seem to be under much pressure, so it's good that she's relaxed. Both the Muggle and Wizarding worlds have established businesses that can provide a safety net for West Asia. At least for now, it seems unlikely that anything will go wrong in either world in the short term. From now on, Zia can live wherever she wants and do whatever she wants, with her family always there to support her. So it's okay to take it easy. Growing up healthy and well-rounded is the best thing. You spoil her too much, but then again, my child is already quite outstanding compared to others. In Cesar's eyes, all her children were the best. Even though her older sister Cyron and second brother Gideon had poor grades in the past, Cesarly could still find their strengths. How are Grandma and Grandpa doing lately? Are they in good health? That's good. They've been saying they want to come see you several times, but the timing is too sensitive and they can't leave Russia anytime soon. In 1991, the Soviet Union dissolved. Raven's maternal grandparents were former Soviet politicians and are now Russian politicians. The timing is already sensitive, and coupled with the two elderly people's identities, it has resulted in not only the two elderly people being unable to travel abroad, but also making it difficult for their family to go back and visit their parents. Now we just hope your grandparents can get everything settled this summer, so we can go back and visit them. No problem at all, Grandma and Grandpa are both very capable. He was previously a member of the Soviet Union, and now he is a member of the Russian government. Ordinary government officials cannot change their status in this way. After chatting with his mother, Cesar, for a while, Cesar finally called for Ja. Ja, holding an orange, chatted with Raven for a long time, mainly about her enrollment in school in the second half of the year. She can't wait any longer. Raven hoped that Ja would come to Hufflepuff because in his opinion, the atmosphere at Hufflepuff was truly the best of the four houses. Ravenclaw and Slytherin go without saying. These two houses have quite a few cliques. Gryffindor may seem gentle and kind, but in reality, the reckless little lions are always getting into fights or arguments. Only Hufflepuff is always peaceful and serene. It's undeniable that there are bad kids in Hufflepuff, but their badness is much more endearing than that of the young wizards in other houses. Most of the bad kids in Hufflepuff are just not very bright and are easily manipulated. For example, Justin Finley. You could say he's bad, but he's not really bad. He'd never do anything particularly bad to anyone in his life, but he's very easily swayed by others' opinions. He believes everything others say. He's a complete idiot, but he thinks he's perfectly clear-headed. In short, Raven considered Hufflepuff to be the house with the best atmosphere out of the four houses. However, Ja said she would prefer to go to Gryffindor because life there seemed very interesting. Raven could only say he respected West Asia's choice. By the way, Reese, can I keep a litter of fluffy kittens? They're so cute. Sure, Pooh Rongrong is easy to raise, but you need to preview the first grade curriculum first, okay? Upon hearing that she still had to study, Zia's little face immediately fell. But there are just too many words. I could never possibly preview them all. I wish I could be as good as you. That would make learning so much easier. Raven chuckled softly. Never compare yourself to anyone, especially since you are better than you think. Zia isn't stupid, she just doesn't like studying. Or rather, none of them really enjoy studying. Currently, Raven is the one who has gone the furthest on the path of learning. The others can't quite calm their restless hearts and sit quietly at their desks to finish reading a textbook. Okay, this is just first grade material. I'm sure you'll finish previewing it quickly. Give the mirror to Mom, I'll chat with her for a bit longer. After chatting with his mother for a while longer, Raven ended the call. He talked with his mother and Zia for an hour. He'll be chatting with his older sister and brother for a while later. Luckily, he found an empty classroom to chat in. If they had chatted in the dormitory, it probably would have disturbed Ack and the others' rest. It's almost time for room check, and today Snape and Professor McGonagall are doing it together. Raven should hurry back to his dorm. However, as the most powerful junior wizard at Hogwarts at present, someone who can hold his own even against Professor Flitwick, he naturally has his own special privileges. Raven has the privilege of not returning to his dorm during room checks and going out for nighttime strolls. Before Raven took out the mirror to chat with his older sister and brother, he closed his eyes and carefully listened to the sounds he heard. Whispers of all beings plus listening amplification spell equals covering the entire castle and targeting only the super hearing ears of a specific species. At this moment, Raven is listening to the snakes inside the castle. There aren't many snakes in Hogwarts Castle, so the noise isn't too loud. How come this damn rat is so skinny? What are you looking at? Look again and I'll bite you. I want to eat food. It seems the serpent monster still hasn't appeared. Where are we going to get enough grenades? I'll have your second brother get you an RPG and send it over. It'll be safer with that, and with your physique you can use it safely. Sis, didn't we clean up our act and go straight? Why do I feel like we've turned into arms dealers? Go away, don't talk nonsense. No arms dealer has as many connections as our family. Raven was speechless. His family wants to arm him to become a terrorist. Don't worry, sis, I said I could handle this and I definitely can. Besides, I'm just killing a snake, I'm not starting World War III at school. I don't need all this weaponry. Their family always cares for their members with all their heart. It took Raven a long time to convince his older sister that he really didn't need an RPG as a weapon for self-defense. However, the older sister still felt that Raven should be provided with some high-powered weapons for self-defense. The same thing happened to my second brother. Raven's second brother, Gideon, intended to give him a miniature mortar, but after Raven argued with him for a while, he changed it to a shotgun. Raven only ended the conversation after confirming several times that his family had not actually turned into arms dealers. That's outrageous. What's next? Should we get him a bomber or a tiger tank? Putting away the two-way mirror, Raven closed his eyes again and listened carefully to the sounds inside the castle. They still haven't come. That guy is very cautious. After leaving the empty classroom, Raven patrolled the castle one more time. I only went back to my dorm after making sure everything was okay. The next 2 weeks were relatively peaceful, a peaceful school life without the basilisk. The Hogwarts common room gradually filled with laughter and cheerful conversation. The situation was better than Raven and Dumbledore had imagined. It turned out that not all of Slytherin's young wizards were beyond redemption. Although young wizards from other houses still harbor some hostility towards most Slytherin young wizards, a small number of Slytherin young wizards have already made friends from other houses. That's a great idea. Raven, you're a natural-born professor. Have you considered becoming a professor at Hogwarts after graduation? Professor Flitwick asked while stuffing cookies into his mouth. No, I'm sorry, Professor. This job is not within my consideration. Oh, don't do that. Think about it again, Raven. Don't worry, you'll definitely become a great teacher and your students will love you. I think he's just afraid of trouble, Professor. The sudden sound startled both Raven and Professor Flitwick. Following the sound, a girl with slightly protruding eyes stood there prettily. Oh, Miss Luna, you startled us. I'm sorry, Professor. Her voice was ethereal and captivating, and combined with her appearance, she looked very much like an elf often described in novels. Regardless, I still stand by my opinion. You can consider it, Raven. You would be an excellent professor. Professor Flitwick left his seat, but before leaving, he took 3 or 4 more chocolate chip cookies of different flavors. Isn't he interesting? I heard he also really likes music. Yes, Professor Flitwick does indeed love music. Raven's Vincent Grindelwald. Raven extended his hand to Luna. Luna shook hands with him in a friendly manner, their hands touching briefly before parting. Luna Lovegood, thank you for saving my mother. This puzzled Raven. I'm sorry, but I don't remember ever saving a Lovegood. Your arrival made Mom stop her dangerous experiments. She always told me that if it weren't for you, she might have been blown up by the curse. Yeah, Raven thought about it carefully for a moment. It seems that's true. In the original story, Luna's mother was killed by a curse. She had been working on a spell that would allow wizards to communicate with sparrows, and she had reached the crucial stage. Oh, I see. Sorry, I stole your mother's thunder. No, actually, she didn't do her research for fame at all. She just felt that the wizarding world needed some innovation. She said if there were more geniuses like you, the wizarding world would at least not decline. Luna chatted with Raven for a while before leaving, the butterfly effect. Raven never imagined that simply creating a spell out of interest would indirectly save Luna's mother. That can be considered a good deed. Raven, come quick. Ron and Harry are going to catch the Thunder Antlion. They're betting on who can catch it faster. Fred's voice brought Raven back to reality. Raven raised an eyebrow and walked over. What's the point of comparing them? This is definitely worth a match. George stared intently at Ron's alchemy sandbox. On the alchemy sandbox, Ron, wand in hand, was moving through the woods. He seemed full of fighting spirit, clearly intending to have a good fight with the Thunder Antlion and forcibly put it into the magical animal box. Harry, on the other hand, is making preparations. Grab yourself a bottle of perfume and prepare some loach which the lightning antlion likes to eat. He intends to take a peaceful and compliant approach. Harry clearly learned a lot from the game and also learned a lot of real-world knowledge afterward. You're very well prepared. Do you think Harry will succeed? Fred spoke up. I don't think Ron necessarily has a chance of losing. George retorted defiantly, no matter what. Raven, do you want to place a bet? Make a fortune. The twins chatted back and forth. Raven was somewhat puzzled. Place a bet? You even opened a betting pool for this. The twins seemed very proud. George hefted the large bag hanging from his waist. The bag made a crisp clinking sound of coins inside. 13 junior wizards have already placed their bets. There are more bets on Harry right now. However, there are quite a few who are betting against Ron. This time, many people will definitely become rich overnight. But we'll definitely make the most. Your game has made us a lot of money lately. Raven narrowed his eyes. Do you frequently offer this type of trading platform during this period? Certainly. Everyone loves your game. You can make a lot of money just by opening a sale. They could actually earn more by renting out the alchemy sandbox that Raven gave them, but they never even considered it. Because the alchemy sandbox was a gift from Raven to them. So you mean, a lot of people enjoy watching these kinds of competitive matches. Raven's question left the two brothers somewhat baffled. Right. What's wrong, Ravens? Raven stroked his smooth chin. Confrontational match. This could perhaps be incorporated into the game content. Attack it, its health is low. Ron, are you an idiot? You used an electric shock spell to fight the Thunder Antlion. How stupid, use a more lethal spell. You're the idiot. If it were more lethal, wouldn't it just wipe out all health points? What's the point of even trying to catch it then? Stop arguing, Harry's almost there. I always said peaceful taming is the most efficient method. Wait a little longer, there's bound to be a twist. I read in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them that the Thunder Antlion is very cunning. It might be lying to Harry. The young wizards surrounded Harry and Ron, chattering noisily. This is much more interesting than watching others play wizard chess. The only downside is that the alchemy sandbox is too small. When everyone gathers around it, some people will inevitably miss it. Raven narrowed his eyes slightly from behind the crowd. This game has great potential in terms of competitive gameplay. But how do we create content related to competition, fighting with magical creatures? Raven shook his head. It's not that doing it this way is wrong, but it's not very interesting. Because there are differences between Fantastic Beasts and Palu, Raven did not add any upgrade or evolution features to Fantastic Beasts. In the game, the only way to improve the combat power of magical creatures is through a good living condition, good health, and good mood, and the improvement is not significant. In other words, if a battle feature is implemented, then an upgrade system must be added to the game. Not only can characters upgrade, but magical creatures must also be able to upgrade and gain power-ups. Otherwise, players would have to keep capturing dangerous and powerful magical creatures because only their combat power is strong enough. But what's the point? Upgrading the system is out of the question. Even if he were willing to add it, Newt and Professor Kettleburn certainly wouldn't allow him to. Moreover, Raven himself didn't want his game to have too many grind elements. In Raven's opinion, the current grind elements in the game are enough. Material collection and having magical creatures work for the player to build infrastructure all require in-game time. Adding another upgrade system, making the game even more grindy, seems unnecessary to Raven. However, multiplayer and online content is a must. Raven pondered for a moment, then quickly determined how to add combat content in the next version. Just like Harry and Ron's rival today, he could easily create several instances. And in an online setting, whoever gets the magical creatures in the instance first would win. Alternatively, they could create role-playing instances where players transform into fantastical creatures to survive. There are so many things that can be done. Raven sat down to the side and began to jot down his thoughts. Harry and Ron quickly decided the winner on their side. Harry won in the end. Ron was nearly killed by the lightning antlion. Even a battle-hardened Auror needs to be careful when facing a Thunder Antlion because the Thunder Antlion has extremely strong resistance to magic and physical attacks, can transform into ball lightning, and its claws and fangs can easily tear a wizard to pieces. In addition, its hearing and sense of smell are extremely keen. Ron has made a lot of progress lately. He learned many spells in the alchemy sandbox, as well as in the dueling club, and even taught himself some spells in private. However, these spells are still too weak against the Thunder Antlion. Moreover, Ron's actual combat ability is not outstanding. Therefore, his failure was almost inevitable. Although Harry doesn't know many spells and his combat skills are average, he's aware of his own limitations. He knew he had no chance of subduing the Thunder Antlion by brute force, so he decided to prepare from the start and win the Thunder Antlion's friendship through a friendly approach. Idiot, if I were in charge, I could definitely subdue the Thunder Antlion. Surprisingly, Malfoy was also among the young wizards watching. He still held his head high with arrogance, looking like a rooster, but his eyes were always fixed on the sand table in Ron's hands. Shut up, Malfoy. I guarantee you'll wet your pants the instant you face the Thunder Antlion. Ron didn't spoil Malfoy at all. He immediately retorted. Ha, are you talking about your own past experiences? Looks like someone once wet their pants because of this game. The two quickly started arguing. The argument quickly escalated from a verbal sparring session between the two houses into a war between Gryffindor and Slytherin. The two houses were locked in fierce competition while Ravenclaw watched the show unfold. Ravenclaw is even fanning the flames. Give him a lesson, George.
He actually dared to call you a muggle. We have to take strong action against him. Let's fight, let's fight. What's the point of just arguing? It's only interesting when they fight. Soon the entire Hogwarts common room was in an uproar, but the Hufflepuff Badgers remained as peaceful as ever. Every day is like this. During this period, Gryffindor and Slytherin argued almost every day, but they never actually fought. Professor McGonagall and Snape have been keeping a close watch on fights lately, and if a fight breaks out, the person who starts it will definitely be severely punished. It is said that in order to deal with the fight seriously, the professors even had Filch dig out old chains and hooks. Of course, this is just a rumor among young wizards, but they still quite believe it. To avoid getting hung up and severely punished, everyone has been fighting much less lately. At most, it's just a quarrel like arguing in a vegetable market. Raven, what are you writing? Cedric sat down next to Raven with a bowl of potato chips in his hand. Raven showed Cedric the contents of the notebook. Update, wow, are you adding so much new stuff? Yes, more ways to play. Cedric frowned, isn't that too much work? With so many things to add and change, Cedric felt his head was about to ache just from looking at them. As Raven's friend, he still hopes that Raven can value his health more. Actually, there aren't many changes needed, don't worry, Seed. The second version doesn't require many modifications to the alchemical components. Most are just spell adjustments. With a little thought, those can be fixed. It may seem like a lot, but in reality, it can be completed in a week at most. Raven originally envisioned Alchemy Sandbox as a game console for the wizarding world. This update doesn't involve many changes to the game console itself. The vast majority of the changes are updates to the game content. It's not complicated to change. Things aren't always all good. Raven's games are indeed fun, and they do allow young wizards to learn something from them, but it does make it easier for young wizards to become addicted. Harry and Hermione are all right. Ron and the Weasley twins really don't have much self-control. They've been caught playing games in class 4 times already. This infuriated Professor McGonagall. How dare you? Do you think your grades are so amazing? George pursed his lips and whispered to Fred, at least our Charms class grades are currently among the best. Fred also smirked, lifting his upper lip to speak to George. And there's also the Fantastic Beasts Protection class. Bang! Professor McGonagall slammed her hand on the table. She was so angry that her hair almost stood on end. Do you think I can't hear you? Tell me yourselves, besides Charms, Magical Creatures Protection, and Transfiguration, what kind of grades do you have in the other courses? Raven did include knowledge of divination and potions in the game, but the three brothers all chose the most mindless and simplest process. One force can overcome all methods. Therefore, they have not learned or understood any other knowledge. I must inform your mothers and let them see what you've been doing at school lately. Upon hearing this, the three brothers' faces turned deathly pale. Professor McGonagall would just yell at them, at most deduct some points or put them in solitary confinement. But if they write to their mothers will really give them a good scolding. Shouting is the least of your worries. They were afraid their mothers would come to the school. Oh no, please, Professor McGonagall, there won't be a next time, we promise. Yes, please don't write to Mom, she'll spank us until our bottoms are raw. Professor McGonagall, however, seemed very resolute. No way, I've given you chances already, and this is the 4th time you've been caught playing games in class. I have to teach you a lesson you won't forget. The three brothers were kicked out of the office. Don't ask, because the answer is always regret. I deeply regret it. Raven had warned them when he gave them the gifts that they absolutely could not play during class. It was only for entertainment during breaks. But they didn't take it seriously. Now things are really messed up. At least 3 more roaring letters are coming our way. I'm so sorry, Raven, I've let him down. Ron wept bitterly at the Gryffindor table. On one hand, he genuinely didn't want to receive the yelling messages. On the other hand, he truly felt guilty. He felt that Raven's plans would also be affected as a result. He regretted it so much. Serves you right. Raven told us long ago to be careful about how much time you spend playing. How dare you play during class and get caught 4 times? You deserve to be punished. Hermione said, clearly displeased. Because of Ron and the twins, Gryffindor's points are almost reduced to 0. Now, only a pitiful few gems remain in the hourglass that symbolizes Gryffindor scores. God knows how furious Hermione was when she found out about this. She cried all night. Many of those marks were earned through her hard work in class. If Ron and his friends were to lose points for some unavoidable reason, like what happened with Norbert last year, she could accept it now. But they didn't. They lost so many Gryffindor points because they were playful and mischievous. Hermione was furious and didn't give Ron and the others a friendly look until this morning. I'm on Hermione's side this time.
Raven warned us about it a long time ago, and you guys really angered Professor McGonagall. I saw her eating this morning, and her face was as black as the bottom of a pot. Harry, unusually, didn't offer any comfort to Ron. This whole mess was entirely Ron's own doing. Ron lay face down on the table. Oh, I was so stupid, really. Regret cannot change the outcome. The consequences he has to bear won't disappear just because Ron regrets it. Soon the owl flew into the auditorium. Ron's trial came first. It was a red letter which was still trembling when it landed in front of Ron. Oh my God, Mom's yelling letter. Ron looked miserable. He couldn't understand why he was the first to receive the yelling message. Why haven't George and Fred received the howling message yet? Open it, Ron, it's starting to smoke. Hermione said anxiously, there's nothing we can do. Whether we die sooner or later, we're all going to die. Ron gritted his teeth and cautiously opened the roaring letter. The next moment, the roaring letter folded into a huge mouth in midair. Ronald Villiers. Weasley. The terrifying sound emanating from the giant mouth seemed to shake the entire auditorium. The auditorium, which had been noisy just moments before, suddenly fell silent. I can't believe you dared to play games during class. Raven trusted you so much, he even warned you repeatedly. How did you do this? Is this how you treat his trust in you? The roar kept increasing in volume, and Ron even felt like his eardrums were about to burst. Do you know how heartbroken I was when I received that letter? I was so ashamed I felt like I was dying. You betrayed your friend's trust. And you betrayed our trust in you too. I'm only warning you this once. If you dare to do it again, I'll personally go to Hogwarts and bring you home. Please give my regards to Raven. All the preceding words were spoken with anger, but the last sentence was spoken very gently. After saying that, the roaring letter spontaneously combusted. Ron was stunned by the shout and didn't recover for a while, but the other young wizards were the first to come to their senses and burst into laughter. George and Fred were also laughing happily. It was clear they had forgotten that they also had their own roaring messages on the way. Ron's roaring letter made no mention of George and Fred, but that doesn't mean they escaped unscathed. It was obvious that Mrs. Weasley intended to yell at all three of them. Raven only learned about this after he returned to the auditorium after his workout. What could he possibly say about that? I've warned them before that they can't play during class time, but they still can't control themselves. Perhaps he needs to devise an anti-addiction system. We also shouldn't place too much faith in Miner's self-control. That noon and afternoon, George and Fred each received their own shouting messages. Before they opened the shouting letter, they didn't think much of it, assuming it was just a matter of being yelled at a few times. But soon after they opened the roar letter, they regretted it. Mrs. Weasley said she would settle all the old and new scores with them after the holidays. Ron has certainly moved on from this matter. A stern letter was basically all the punishment he could muster. But the two brothers, George and Fred, are clearly not. Even more terrifying punishments await them after the holiday. No, 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 your I is not pronounced. This syllable is very important. It's one of the key points to stabilizing the entire spell, which is why your world can never be constructed. Raven is teaching Fleur how to use the game world-building spell. However, this spell is too difficult, even more difficult than the Veil spell in some ways, so Fleur can never learn it. Don't rush, take your time, this spell is quite difficult to use. Call. Furong let out a long sigh of relief. She was genuinely furious. This curse was so difficult that she even thought she was a muggle at one point. Damn it, have you even thought about how you're going to mass-produce this? You can't possibly build the world for every single alchemy sandbox by hand, can you? Raven shook the notebook in his hand. I've had this planned for a while. I intend to combine the game world-building spell with alchemy to create a special alchemical card, which will make mass production much easier. It works on the same principle as older cartridge-based game consoles. Raven hasn't quite figured out how to make Witcher phones or computers yet, but he can definitely make the old Witcher cartridge-based game console. This was a plan Raven had in mind when he was creating his first alchemy simulation game. That's good, this spell is quite difficult to use. If your employees were to learn it, it would probably take them hundreds of years. You know it's difficult, yet you still want to learn it. I want to build my own worlds. Actually, Hibiscus mainly wanted to see if she could help Raven after learning this spell. But it seems that the curse of the academic society is difficult enough right now, so let's talk about helping out later. By the way, haven't you caught that newborn basilisk yet? Raven shrugged, we haven't found it. We've searched almost everywhere near the Forbidden Forest inside the school, but unfortunately we still— The next day, as usual, Raven gave the fish a chance first. As long as they bite the hook, Raven won't have to catch them. However, these fish still refused to listen. Then don't blame Raven for being ruthless. Fishermen can't stay airheads forever. Even if it means catching them, we'll catch all these reckless fish today, so Raven jumped down once again. Soon, Black Lake began to continuously spew fish out of its surface. Black Lake is indeed very rich now. Adult fish and fish nearing adulthood grow large and plump. Raven's feeding had a significant effect. The Geminis only dared to play in the water by the lake. They wouldn't dare to dive headfirst into deep water like Raven did. There were quite a few students coming and going. They saw the twins playing in the Black Lake and both looked puzzled. "Hey George, what are you doing in the Black Lake?" Professor McGonagall is definitely going to yell at you again if she finds out. A young Hufflepuff wizard spoke up. As the saying goes, a multitude of fleas don't itch. Since we're already on the professor's blacklist, instead of worrying about whether performing well will earn us a better impression, we might as well enjoy the present moment. Besides, as long as you don't tell anyone, who will know we're swimming in Black Lake. All right. The young Hufflepuff wizard seemed to have been persuaded. He was about to leave when a fish suddenly emerged from the surface of the Black Lake. The fish traced an almost perfect parabola in the air before landing precisely in the pile of fish on the shore. "What's going on? Didn't you catch these fish?" George and Fred couldn't help but laugh when they thought about it. No, they are gifts from nature. Yes, it's a gift from nature. Because George and I often get close to nature, nature has rewarded us. Do I look like an idiot? Do you think this reason is convincing to yourselves? But soon, another fish emerged from the surface of Black Lake. The Hufflepuff boy was stunned. What exactly happened? Was Jordan underwater? No, not here. You might still see him if you go to the auditorium now. He ate too much. We couldn't be bothered to wait for him. So I came here first. It's common knowledge that Lee Kyaudin eats a lot. He should still be having lunch in the auditorium at this time. But what's going on here? Did you bring in other people? We didn't find anyone else. There was no looking for him. Raven came to catch fish on his own. In the end, the twins didn't give the young Hufflepuff wizard a definite answer. The little wizard didn't believe that the water would spontaneously spew fish out. He stated that he would definitely find a reasonable explanation. There are too many little wizards who say that. George and Fred weren't worried at all that they would find out it was Raven who was catching fish underwater. Such reckless behavior is completely at odds with the elegance of a prince. It was also thanks to Raven casting a bubble head charm on himself that he didn't need to surface for air every now and then. Otherwise, if other passersby saw Raven catching fish underwater, their impression of him would likely change to some extent. The fish piled up more and more on the shore. George and Fred swam ashore, dried themselves off, and gave themselves a thorough cleaning. They also caught a fish that tried to escape. Now you know how to survive. Where were you before? Serves him right. Of all the people to be in the Air Force, why did Raven have to be in the Air Force? Give him back his Air Force status for a year. Fred threw the fish back into the pile. By the way, isn't that enough? Is Raven trying to catch all the big fish in Black Lake? Go ask Merlin, only he knows. Raven spent a year in the Air Force. Who knows how much resentment he harbors? That's true. Back in the day, my dad fished all day without a single bite, and he got so angry he almost blew up the lake next to our house. Raven's resentment is probably even deeper. The Air Force can really drive you crazy. Most importantly, sometimes all the steps are correct, but the fish just won't bite. Like Raven, everything about him, from the bait and the rod to the casting motion, is near perfect. The nest that needed to be attacked has been attacked. I've done everything I was supposed to do, but the fish just won't come. In this situation, if you can't even find the problem, it's no wonder you're angry. As the two sat on the shore, sunbathing and chatting, Harry and his friends approached from a distance. Huh, it's you guys, where's Raven? What do you need him for? Yes, His Highness is a very busy man. If you need anything, you can talk to our secretary first, and we'll see if we need to bother him. Although Harry and the others were all Raven's friends, Raven probably didn't see the need to hide this from them. But since Raven didn't say he could tell them, they won't. However, their concealment was clearly unnecessary. As soon as he finished speaking, Raven poked his head out of the water and swam toward the shore. He was also carrying 2 fish in his hand. The 2 fish were clearly still struggling, but even in the water they were no match for Raven. Raven only saw Harry and the others after they got ashore. Harry and his friends were almost speechless with astonishment. Raven got so angry at the fish that he jumped into the water. This is somewhat different from the Raven they knew. Good afternoon, you've come at the perfect time. I'm planning to clean up the fish I caught, and then go find Hagrid for a seafood hot pot. Fishing, but... Before Ron could finish speaking, Hermione elbowed him, silencing him. Hermione knew Raven's current state all too well. Her father used to get this frustrated when he couldn't catch anything while fishing. Even if he didn't catch anything from beginning to end, he still wanted to drink a mouthful of lake water before leaving. When people asked, he said he had actually caught some, but they weren't very big, so he released them all. I originally thought Raven was in a stable mood and wouldn't act like this. In retrospect, Raven is indeed emotionally stable, but that doesn't mean he has no emotions at all. He's been saving them all up. We came to see you about this too. Raven waved his wand, giving himself a thorough cleaning and drying. The piles of fish on the shore were also pushed up by magic. Let's go, we've caught so many fish. After processing them, it'll definitely be enough for a delicious and satisfying meal. Everyone's mouths twitched involuntarily as they looked at that huge pile of fish. Okay, whatever you say it is, if you say it was caught by fishing, then it was caught by fishing. Ron rubbed the spot where he had been elbowed and questioned Hermione in a low voice. Why did you stab me? I was just trying to remind Raven that it wasn't a fish that was caught. Hermione sighed and rubbed her forehead. He said that on purpose. You really should learn how to read the room. Wow, you really caught so many fish again. Looks like we're all going to have a good feast today. Hagrid planned to go to the basement to retrieve the vegetables and yesterday's fish, but Raven said he could do it himself. Hagrid certainly had no problem with that. Raven opened the trapdoor and went back to the basement. Everything is just like it was yesterday. No problem. There's absolutely no problem. Raven used a whispered message on himself. Come on, whoever you are. The basement was very quiet. Hagrid did an excellent job with this basement. It was not only cool enough for storing food, but also insect-proof and moisture-proof. Even using the whisper of all beings, Raven didn't hear anything for a moment, but Raven wasn't giving up. He cast another listening spell on himself. We can screen them one by one at worst. First screen for spiders, then screen for pythons. Hungry, want to eat, want to kill, why won't you let me go back? Humans, I want to eat. I've found you, it's challenging but not too difficult. Raven curled the corners of his mouth slightly. Hagrid's cabin is on the edge of the Forbidden Forest, where there are plenty of spiders and snakes. But the person being searched now is Raven. Raven, is there a problem? Hagrid, noticing that Raven hadn't come up for so long, asked curiously through the trapdoor. No, it's nothing, I'm just thinking about what to eat today. I'll be right there. Finding the general direction is enough. Snakes, watching him bloodthirsty, hostile to humans. If Raven still can't guess what the other party is, he might as well find a block of tofu and smash his head against it. Alright kids, now we need to start processing these fish. Who wants to join? Me, I'm so good at preparing fish. I always help my mom prepare fish at home. Ron was the first to be hit. But George and Fred immediately sabotaged their plan. Come on, Ron, the only time you ever helped Mom with anything was when you made those sugar candies. And because the heat wasn't controlled properly, the sugar turned completely black. It also damaged one of Mom's pots. Mom used to really love that pot. Ron blushed immediately. I did help my mom prepare the fish, but you were all at school then. Ginny showed no mercy to her brother either. If you mean you helped your mother rescue the goldfish that you ate and it died, then you did indeed handle the fish. The poor goldfish had simply eaten too much. Mrs. Weasley could have saved it with a magic spell, but Ron thought it had drowned, so he pulled it out and started CPR. By the time Mrs. Weasley found out, the scene had become a crime scene. Ron was quite a troublemaker when he was a kid. Raven chuckled a few times as he used a spell to fetch water for Hagrid. I forgot to ask you yesterday, Hagrid, have you found anything strange in the Forbidden Forest lately? Hagrid sighed. Sorry, Raven, nothing special. However, I've noticed there have been a few more traces of people entering and leaving the Forbidden Forest lately, but I don't remember walking those paths. I think it might be because I haven't been getting enough rest lately. Raven nodded slightly, looking as if he hadn't thought of anything at all. Could those tracks have been left by magical creatures like centaurs or unicorns? After all, there's no fence around the Forbidden Forest. Hagrid smiled and shook his head. No, Raven, believe me, I know all too well what kind of traces I'll leave in the Forbidden Forest. After all, a half-giant isn't common, and very few magical creatures can leave the same marks. Raven nodded. Then you probably forgot. You've been looking very tired lately and haven't been sleeping well. Hagrid rolled up his sleeves. Although Hagrid has regained his right to use his wand, his long-standing habits won't suddenly change. He still prefers to handle many things with his hands. Actually, I've been sleeping very well lately, from dusk until noon the next day, but for some reason my energy and memory have declined, which is really strange. Didn't you go to see Mrs. Pomfrey? Hagrid shrugged. Madame Pomfrey knows a lot about young wizards' bodies, but not so much about half-giants' bodies. Most of the time, even when I feel unwell, Madame Pomfrey's examination results will simply conclude that I'm perfectly healthy.
I see.
Furong also mentioned to me that having a different bloodline than ordinary people can indeed leave many therapists at a loss. Perhaps you should go to St. Mungo's hospital to have a look. Yes, I plan to go take a look in a while.
Why wait?
Treatment should be sought as early as possible. Hagrid was a little embarrassed. My tadpoles are almost in their juvenile stage, and I want to observe their habits during that period. They're willing to sacrifice their health for scientific research. I know I can't convince you, but I hope you can take care of your health. Of course, don't worry about Raven, I'll take good care of myself. Fish hot pot delicious, everyone raved about the new flavor. The fish in the Black Lake are naturally very plump, and the house elves in the Hogwarts kitchens often go there to catch fish to make fish soup and fried fish for the young wizards. Raven had been feeding the fish for almost a whole year, which made them even plumper and more delicious. Slice the vegetables with magic, quickly cook them in a pot, remove them, and dip them in a little sauce. It's so delicious you can't stop eating it. During dinner, Harry, Ron, and Hermione quietly told Raven that they wanted to sneak out of the dormitory after they finished their investigation that day and go back to the Chamber of Secrets to look for the newly appeared basilisk. They still considered that place highly suspicious. The three kids asked Raven if they could come along so they would feel more confident. However, Raven refused them. After returning to the castle, Raven parted ways with the others. This time, he did not find Dumbledore in the headmaster's office. Instead, they found him outside the secret room. "You'll always find me, Raven." While I'd prefer Hibiscus to say that to me, I think what you're trying to express isn't what I'm thinking.
Haha, of course. What's wrong? What happened? Things have progressed.
Upon hearing this, Dumbledore's expression immediately turned serious. "Grab my arm, Raven. I thought no one at Hogwarts could apparate. The principal always has certain privileges. Besides Fox, I also need to be able to act on my own, don't I?" Raven grabbed Dumbledore's arm. After a series of crackling sounds like firecrackers, the two returned to the principal's office. Dumbledore waved his aged hand gently, and the headmaster's office fell silent. "Tell me in detail, Raven, what did you discover?" "Shouldn't we call Mr. Grindelwald?" Dumbledore shook his head. "This is a Hogwarts matter."
He won't interfere.
Raven nodded and sat down on the sofa with practiced ease. "Professor, I'm afraid you've been tricked. Hagrid was the third person to find the diary." Dumbledore frowned slightly. "But I have carefully examined his memory. That's why I said you'd been tricked." Raven slowly recounted what he had done yesterday and today. Peeping from the basement, distant sounds, Hagrid's strange physical condition, and inexplicably appearing traces in the Forbidden Forest. Dumbledore wasn't stupid. By putting all the known information together, he immediately arrived at the same answer as Raven. "You mean?" "Yes, Tom Riddle knows you'll carefully examine Hagrid's memories, and Hagrid will definitely let you examine his memories. And as long as you carefully examine Hagrid's memories, no matter how he modifies them, he'll eventually slip up and be put on the defensive, so the best way is to simply prevent the memory from ever existing. Modifying memories would give me away, so why not just not modify them? If the memory never existed from beginning to end, then there's no need to modify it, and there's no way it could give anything away. Manipulating Hagrid's body while he sleeps."
Raven nodded.
"In this way, Hagrid won't have any related memories, and there won't be anything wrong with his own memories. Furthermore, Hagrid's extremely strong vitality and physical attributes will allow him to provide Tom Riddle with ample nourishment without revealing any weaknesses for a short period." Dumbledore rubbed his temples. "I'm getting old, my brain really isn't working as well as it used to." Was he too reliant on legilimency, and Tom actually pulled a fast one on him? Hagrid was already somewhat slovenly. His skin was tanned, and his hair and beard even covered most of his face. Even if Tom Riddle frantically absorbs Hagrid's life force under these circumstances, Hagrid will not show signs of weakness or paleness in the short term.
So it seems Tom is close to succeeding.
Raven nodded affirmatively. Tom Riddle's notebook had only two purposes after entering Hogwarts. One option is to inherit Salazar Slytherin's legacy and expel the Mudbloods from Hogwarts or simply kill them. The other is a resurrection, announcing Voldemort's return to the wizarding world in a young, healthy, and energetic form. Including Hague, Tom Riddle has already parasitized 3 people. The first time was Ginny, the second time was Lockhart, and the third time was Hagrid. Of the 3, only Lockhart can be considered to be in good form. Ginny's life force was almost drained by 60%. Hagrid's vigorous life force appears to have been absorbed by about 70% this time. With so much life force at his disposal, Tom Riddle is probably very close to being resurrected, if not. He was very alert, but I sensed that as he neared full resurrection, he was becoming increasingly impatient. Otherwise, he would never have spied on me yesterday, revealing that slight flaw. Tom was indeed more impulsive when he was young, so I think he'll definitely keep Hagrid under control tonight. Follow Hagrid and you'll find Tom Riddle and the Basilisk. This matter cannot be delayed any longer. Raven didn't want to be distracted by this matter any longer. In an instant, Dumbledore and Raven reached a consensus. Dumbledore considered for a moment, then spoke. Looks like I'll have to take the little wizard out for a night stroll myself tonight. Are you sure you need me? That's just a young Voldemort. Even if he were resurrected, he probably wouldn't be a match for you, Professor. I'm glad you trust me so much, but he has helpers after all, and I think I'll need one too. Raven was speechless. They can't even come up with a decent excuse. Then why not invite Professor Sprout and Professor McGonagall? You still can't make an excuse, Professor. Dumbledore chuckled and patted Raven's head. All right, I just wanted to give you some training. You still need real combat experience. I believe that with your strength and mentality, you shouldn't be in danger when facing the Basilisk. As for Minerva and the others, I'll inform them to come. During dinner, Raven didn't tell anyone about it. This matter is somewhat dangerous. There's no need to involve Ryan and his group in this mess. The latter half of last year's Philosopher's Stone incident was almost entirely under Dumbledore's control. But this time was different. Even Dumbledore was outsmarted by Tom Riddle. To be honest, Raven didn't even want to inform Furong this time, but a promise is a promise, and it must be kept. Are you sure you want to come over? I mean, we can achieve the same effect using a two-way mirror. I'm sure a promise is a promise, and you promised me that last time. Raven curled his lip. He originally planned to deal with the Basilisk first, and then deal with Tom Riddle's diary. Solving them separately isn't difficult, but if you put them together and solve them together, the difficulty increases dramatically. All right, but please stay far away. You can watch through the telescope in Dumbledore's office. Furong rolled her eyes dramatically. What's the point of looking at something from that far away? We might as well use a two-way mirror. Besides, does Dumbledore already know about our little tricks? You're underestimating the greatest white wizard of this century. Our little tricks won't fool him. They've met quite a few times this semester. Dumbledore must have noticed long ago. However, this old man had always been very lenient towards students' relationships and violations of school rules, so he never said anything. Then I wouldn't stay in the principal's office. It's so far away. Then I won't agree. You should use the two-way mirror. This time the risk is high. You can't afford any accidents. The two argued back and forth. In the end, it was Hibiscus who took a step back. She could stay in the principal's office, but Raven had to keep the two-way mirror they used for communication on his chest. The distance is too far, and there are many things that Furong is worried she won't be able to see. This is something Raven can still see. But be extremely careful and never look directly into the Basilisk's eyes. Although there's a two-way mirror as a medium, even if you did look directly into its eyes, you'd probably only be petrified at worst, but it's always better to be cautious. Don't worry, I'm not that clumsy. After resolving the matter with Fleur, Raven went to see Dumbledore and explained everything. Sure enough, Dumbledore wasn't surprised at all. I also wondered how long it would take you to tell me about this. Regarding your request, my answer is, of course, why not? Dumbledore was very pleased with Raven's handling of the matter. He neither argued with Furong about it, nor did he give in blindly because of love. Love ... It's truly like fine wine, intoxicating. Albus, how could you let this student from another school into the principal's office? She might be a Beauxbaton spy. Get her out of here. Shut up, Blake. She's Raven's girlfriend, you idiot. That proves Vincent has also been misled. He's not trustworthy either. The appearance of Hibiscus caused a commotion among the portraits of the principal in the principal's office. What secrets does Hogwarts hold? Does the daily menu served in the auditorium count? Furong gave a disdainful laugh. In fact, there are definitely things about Hogwarts that cannot be known by other schools. But these things aren't written down on paper. Fleur would have no way of knowing the portrait of the headmaster and Dumbledore unless they spoke. Therefore, the claim of stealing secrets is completely unfounded. Very rude of you, Phineas. Dumbledore smiled and waved his hand, flipping the portrait of Headmaster Black over so that he faced the wall. This caused Principal Blake's portrait to erupt in a frantic, powerless rage, for he was, after all, just a portrait. Miss Delacour, you can stay here for now. If you get hungry, you can have some of the candy here. I personally recommend the cockroach piles. Don't let their plain appearance fool you, they actually taste quite good. Dumbledore brought out his pile of cockroaches. Looking at the cockroach-shaped candies crawling around in the bowl, Hibiscus couldn't help but twitch her lips. No, thank you. Wizards actually buy this kind of candy. Furong used to think that people who made this kind of candy were just trying to take revenge on society. What a pity their food was delicious. As he spoke, Dumbledore popped one into his mouth. He winked at Raven, then went to the balcony on his own. This was him giving Raven and Fleur some time alone. I never thought anyone could actually eat these things. They don't look any cuter than real cockroaches. Raven shrugged. There will always be people who value taste more than the appearance of food. But we can't ignore its taste either, can we? Actually, its texture is also unique. I have a feeling Dumbledore might very well have been enjoying its peculiar taste. Furong's expression became even more complicated. His, tastes are quite unique. I often joke with my friends that if Dumbledore went into the wild to survive, he would never go hungry. Why? Because he can tolerate the taste of those damn insects. The two chatted for a while, and Raven, seeing that it was getting late, got up to prepare to leave with Dumbledore. I'm leaving. Be careful. Raven smiled easily. Don't worry, what could possibly happen to me with the greatest white wizard of all time? Raven went to Dumbledore's side and took his arm. An explosion rang out and Raven and Dumbledore left the headmaster's office. Only Furong remained in the principal's office. The portraits of the headmasters were all secretly observing Fleur, since Raven would likely be the headmaster of Hogwarts the year after next, barring any unforeseen circumstances. They were quite curious about the little guy's love life. To put it bluntly, it's gossip. However, their gaze did not affect Furong. She was always used to other people's gaze upon her. At that moment, she was simply staring intently at the two-way mirror. Raven and Dumbledore arrived high above Hagrid's hut. Dumbledore cast the illusion charm on them. How come I've never seen this kind of spell that makes someone appear out of thin air before? It's probably because I haven't published it. It's not surprising that Dumbledore invented this spell himself. It's already midnight. Even the little wizards who wander around at night should be going back to bed to rest by now. Then it's about time. Sure enough, a short while later, the back door of Hagrid's cabin was opened. A tall figure slowly left through the back door. Yaya didn't bark. Hagrid used to occasionally go out on patrol at midnight, so Yaya didn't notice anything unusual. It was probably quite happy, after all. Hagrid hadn't taken it with him when he went out at midnight these past few days, so it could sleep soundly in its soft, warm, and safe little nest. Professor, you can let me go now. I've learned this spell. You've already, well, you always are. Dumbledore removed the levitation spell from Raven, but Raven remained standing steadily in the air. Although it may be a bit inappropriate, I still have to praise you, Raven, for your exceptional learning ability. Thank you, Professor. Let's follow them. The two stood high in the sky and cast illusion spells on themselves, so the creatures in the Forbidden Forest barely noticed them along the way. It seems only the centaurs noticed something amiss. May you achieve a resounding victory, like a glittering white star. Hagrid took many detours in the Forbidden Forest. The Forbidden Forest is home to too many magical creatures. To avoid disturbing them, one must bypass their territory. Tom Riddle is very cautious. If it were me, I would call it cunning. Hibiscus's voice came from the two-way mirror on Raven's chest. She had absolutely no liking for Tom Riddle, so of course she would use rather negative words to describe him. Hagrid wandered around and around until he finally arrived at a clearing deep in the Forbidden Forest. There was a large, dark hole in the open space, which looked very deep. The serpent monster with a rooster's comb on its head and scales like feathers on its body stayed in the big cave. Dumbledore waved his hand, instantly severing the scent between him and Raven. A snake's forked tongue is no mere decoration. According to Newt's previous reports, the basilisk's forked tongue is even more sensitive than that of an ordinary snake. They can even distinguish the scent, location, and even size of small flying insects that suddenly appear within 100 meters by using their forked tongues. Hagrid numbly approached the large hole. After waiting for more than 10 minutes, a young man finally emerged from the nearby woods. Dumbledore frowned. It seems the worst has happened. Tom Riddle has absorbed enough life force. His current state is almost identical to that of someone who has been resurrected. It seems that the mudblood isn't as outstanding as I imagined. At the very least, he doesn't trust his own senses enough. Tom Riddle approached Hagrid and said to him with a mocking tone. The basilisk's glance at Raven from its hiding place in the basement after shrinking was indeed a mistake, and Raven's subsequent reaction certainly made him break out in a cold sweat. But Raven didn't follow Hagrid to find them. In his view, this indicated that Raven hadn't noticed the problem. It seems completely unnecessary to be so wary of a muddle-headed person who will jump into the lake to catch fish if he can't catch any himself. Hey, not everyone possesses extraordinary talent. Judging a person's talent based on their bloodline is extremely foolish. I thought you had learned this, but it seems you still cling to your old ideas. Dumbledore leaped down from the sky. He made a dashing entrance. Raven felt that the old man was doing this mainly to put on an act to show off in front of the young Voldemort. It did have an effect. Tom Riddle was clearly startled. Dumbledore. Hello, Tom. Tom Riddle quickly retreated to the edge of the pit and took Hagrid's wand from the stunned Hagrid beside him. If you don't want this big, dumb guy to suffer an agonizing death, I suggest you don't make any rash moves. Tom Riddle raised his wand and pointed it at Hagrid. In fact, Dumbledore could have taken down Tom Riddle directly, but he wanted to see if Tom Riddle had any other tricks up his sleeve. It seems that it no longer exists. Your methods are still clumsy. But you cannot deny it, it was very effective. Arise, my servant, go and kill that old B*******. Tom Riddle shouted at the pit behind him while holding Hagrid hostage. He was really looking forward to seeing Dumbledore's surprised expression. Unfortunately, Dumbledore remained remarkably calm throughout. The basilisk slowly crawled out of the pit. But to Tom Riddle's bewilderment, the basilisk did not reply to him today. It didn't say anything at all, which is quite different from the usual basilisk monsters. Before Tom Riddle could turn around, Raven's voice came from behind him. I don't really think this can still be called a basilisk, but the knowledge you applied to it was certainly aesthetically pleasing. Raven's shadowless light relentlessly suppressed the basilisk, preventing it from even opening its eyes. Raven's strongest spell right now is no joke. Now, would you like to follow the normal procedure, or would you prefer to be more efficient, Mr. Riddle? Raven controlled the basilisk, which slowly came to a stop behind Tom Riddle. You damned mudblood, how dare you call that filthy name? It seems you want to follow the normal procedure. Without another word, Raven raised his wand and ripped off the basilisk's head. This scene completely stunned Tom Riddle. Is this the fighting power a little wizard should have? Even Dumbledore wouldn't dare say he could just rip the basilisk's head off. Raven wasted no time. With another wave of his wand, the power of moonlight sent Tom Riddle flying. It's much simpler than I expected. This is my first lesson for you tonight, Raven. When something is far simpler than we imagine, there's definitely something fishy going on. Dumbledore pointed to the basilisk corpse that Raven had just tossed aside. The snake monster's head and body began to rapidly regenerate. Goodness, unkillable. Raven immediately attempted to suppress the basilisk's head and body regeneration using the light and shadowless technique, but this not only failed to work, but also accelerated the depletion of Raven's magic power. At the same time, a green light flew towards Raven from the other side. Dumbledore pulled Raven away, causing Avada Kedavra to miss. Tom Riddle rose with a sinister grin. I must admit I underestimated you, Ravens, didn't I? You certainly possess great talent, join me. I'll resurrect you, become your friend, and we'll leap over death together. Can't you Voldemorts come up with a better excuse? Raven seemed very impatient. These Voldemorts are so easy to understand. Tom Riddle's face immediately darkened. Since that's the case, then you shall die, Avada Kedavra. Dumbledore pulled the head of the basilisk, which Raven was controlling, towards him, blocking the attack. But the regeneration on the basilisk's head only paused briefly before the granulation tissue above it resumed its wriggling and growth. Oh my God, what did you do? How can such a creature exist in the world? This is proof that I have surpassed Salazar's and Slytherin. This is my most powerful assistant in purging Hogwarts. He raised his wand and attacked Dumbledore. Apparition cannot be used in the Forbidden Forest. Therefore, Tom Riddle had no way to escape. He had no choice but to fight Dumbledore and then find a chance to escape. Raven temporarily stopped controlling the basilisk. He doesn't have much magic power, so we must plan carefully. Since we can't stop the basilisk from regenerating, there's no need to waste any more time on this. He could have waited until the basilisks recovered before taking control of them. When the basilisk recovered, Raven was still assisting Dumbledore. The ability to create seamless light and shadow is a bug-level magic spell. Dumbledore and Grindelwald have certainly overcome it. This spell could fully enable Raven, as a second-year wizard, to directly participate in battles against legendary wizards. Damn mudbloods. The only problem is that this spell consumes a lot of mana, and Raven is currently short of mana. Tom Riddle's magic is no longer weak, so Raven's control can only hold him for about a second each time. He's not in a good state. Raven approached Hagrid, laid him down, and pulled the hidden black diary from his coat pocket. After activating the Soul Eye charm, Raven easily discovered that the notebook no longer contained a soul. Tom Riddle has been resurrected. The notebook has now become an ordinary black magic prop bearing traces of black magic. He has fully recovered, if you mean there's something wrong with his current condition. Dumbledore frowned and shook his head. He had already realized that Tom Riddle had fully recovered, but that wasn't what he meant by the condition is not right. No, I mean his vitality is very strange. It seems he not only transformed the basilisk, but also himself. That's something he'd do. If we set aside Tom Riddle's character, he was actually a very talented person. It can transform the basilisk into something almost invincible, and even give it some of its immortality traits. Such talent is not something that ordinary people possess. This is going to be difficult to solve. Not necessarily, we could start by examining the soul level. Raven didn't believe Tom Riddle could arm his own soul to an almost invincible state. If all else fails, there's always the fiery blaze spell, isn't there? I'll just use this thing to burn them directly. I don't believe they can be restored after turning to ashes. Watch out for those two snakes. Hibiscus's voice drew Raven's attention back to the basilisk. Two serpent monsters, their blood-red mouths wide open, were about to rush over and tear Raven apart, but Raven didn't give them a chance. Instead, he once again bound them with a seamless use of light and shadow. Raven had a preliminary idea on how to deal with the two basilisk monsters. He opened his satchel and took out 2 teapots. Why has Raven been coming home so late every night lately? Cedric had planned to come and play cards with Raven, but when he arrived at the dorm, he found that Raven wasn't there. Gray and the others exchanged glances, then sighed in unison. To tell you the truth, Seed, Raven has been patrolling the castle every night looking for people lately. He's the only junior wizard allowed to patrol the castle after dark. He didn't want us to tell us before, saying he was afraid it would cause trouble if word got out. Cedric looked puzzled. You even kept it from me. Could it be that he leaked something without his knowledge before? We didn't think about anything before, sorry Seed. What do you want with Raven today? It's almost time for roll call, isn't it? I came here hoping to play cards with him, but he's not here. That guy's always so busy. Kieran lay in bed already changed into his pajamas and ready to rest. Yeah, he seems so busy, not like a kid at all. We're not even adults yet, right? He seems busier than most adults. Ryan hid the truancy candy he'd gotten from the twins under his bed, making sure the professors wouldn't see it at first glance before getting up and saying, "He's much busier than the adults. Even my dad isn't as busy as him." I think this is the kind of trouble that geniuses with too many ideas have. Cedric shrugged. He held a brand new deck of cards in his hand. He borrowed it from a friend in a Muggle family. By the way, Seed, you know how to play poker. I thought wizards played wizard chess. Actually, I wasn't very good at this game before last night, but my friend taught me last night, and I even beat him twice. Gray looked somewhat surprised. Side, you learned to play poker in just one day? Really? Which game? When I first learned poker, my mom almost beat me horribly. She always had a better hand. Blackjack, I think that's the name. No wonder you learned how to play in just one day, Seed. The rules of blackjack are frighteningly simple. How about we have some fun? Forget it, time's almost up. Snape's supposed to be checking our dorms today. If he catches us playing cards, we're doomed. I'm glad to hear that you actually have a clear understanding of what you're doing and what the consequences will be. The moment the sound rang out, cold sweat broke out on the backs of all 5 people in the dormitory. Cedric turned around. Snape, his face grim, was staring intently at the playing cards in Cedric's hand. He reached out towards Cedric with the speed of someone about to punch him. Give it to me, Mr. Cedric, unless you think I'm a blind and deaf old bat, in which case Hufflepuff would lose 20 points instead of 10. Cedric grinned, but he didn't struggle much. He had the playing cards right in his hand. What excuse could he possibly offer? Just as Snape said, making excuses would only give him more reasons to lose points. He could only grimace as he handed the playing cards to Snape. Snape held the playing cards, his expression mocking, ordinary Muggle items. You. Before he could finish speaking, a loud bang interrupted him. A sound like an explosion came from outside the castle. Snape frowned deeply and strode quickly to his bedside in the dormitory. Raven and his friend's dormitory windows faced the Forbidden Forest, with Black Lake below offering excellent views and natural light. Open the window. The sound we just heard clearly came from the Forbidden Forest. What happened? He looked out the window and 2 enormous figures flew out of the Forbidden Forest. Those looked like 2 giant snakes. Damn it. Snape understood almost immediately what had happened. He turned abruptly and left Raven's dorm room. He moved so fast that his robes billowed around, making his silhouette look more like a giant bat. Whoa, what are those two things? Are they basilisk monsters? Gray and the others also gathered around the window. It looks like the professors found them. That means we'll be able to go back to our own dorm soon. So far, they don't want to get involved in this matter. The basilisk was too dangerous. They still remembered how Ack had been beaten so badly by one that almost all the bones in his body were broken. This is something the professor should handle. All they need to do is shout, "Go, Professor," behind him, and that's it. But the figure that appeared the next moment completely changed their minds. For Merlin's sake. Isn't that Raven? Under the moonlight, a small white dot emerged from the forbidden forest. You won't find anyone in all of Hogwarts with whiter hair than Raven. What's wrong with him? Let's go, let's go. Quick, let's go help. Without a second thought, the young wizards grabbed their wands and prepared to rush out of the dormitory. Raven was engaged in a fierce battle downstairs. How could they possibly watch from upstairs? Raven's other friends also reacted in the same way. Unbeknownst to him, Raven had already built a network of relationships centered around himself at Hogwarts. On Raven's side. Because the light and shadow without trace consumes too much energy, he has to use other methods to suppress the serpent monster. These two serpent monsters should have had the characteristics of bird snakes. Lure them in with a teapot and teacups, and you should be able to catch them easily. However, these serpent monsters possessed extraordinary strength, retaining their original power even after shrinking. This allows them to easily break free of the teapot's confinement, unlike birds and snakes which are simply trapped inside. It's unbelievable. Tom Riddle has such talent, why would he go to such extremes to achieve his goals? So talented. If he could create basilisks, and even transform them into their current near-invincible state, why would he resort to such an extreme method as Horcruxes to attempt immortality? Be careful of their eyes are about to recover. Fleur's voice drew Raven's attention to the basilisk's eyes. Another beam of light flashed out without a trace, and the basilisk's eyes, which had just begun to recover, were slashed open once more. The basilisk let out a painful scream, but Raven showed no sympathy whatsoever. We can't catch them, we can't kill them, it's unbelievable. Killing the basilisk is useless. It regenerates quickly, and Raven feels it's even getting stronger. Every injury is more like an evolution for it. I couldn't catch it. The small teapot had already been easily smashed, so it served no purpose at all. Is cursing the only solution? Kill the basilisk's soul with a curse. There was no time to hesitate. Raven cast a soul eye charm into his own eyes. First, examine the basilisk's soul, then find a spell to crush its soul. Marvelous. This serpent monster has no normal soul. Raven used polymorph to temporarily subdue the two basilisks, but what he saw through the soul eye charm indicated that the two basilisks had no normal souls at all. Their souls were twisted and broken, leaving virtually no room for further destruction. If we compare the soul to software, a normal soul is like a normal program. The souls of Neville's parents, on the other hand, were like a normal program that was destroyed and shattered by a virus. But the basilisk's soul was not shattered. Their souls are essentially a massive collection of viruses forming a code-like structure. There is no way to punish them at the soul level unless the entire program is completely deleted. That's why even Avada Kedavra couldn't kill it. But then another problem arose. How can one completely erase the soul? Destroying a soul is easy, but annihilating a soul, even the infamous Avada Kedavra curse couldn't do that. Or we should use fierce fire, one blast of fierce fire and it'll burn you to ashes. Torn apart. Hibiscus's voice rang out beside Raven. Her spell struck the basilisk's eye precisely, scratching its nascent eye once more. Raven wasn't surprised at all by Hibiscus's sudden appearance. Are you not trusting me at all? Don't be silly, I came precisely because I trust you. Hibiscus took over from Raven and used polymorph to conjure ropes to bind the basilisk. This is a technical job. If the rope is tied too tightly, the basilisk will have an opportunity to shrink its size. If it is tied too loosely, the basilisk will be able to break free easily. The bird snake's abilities are indeed troublesome, especially since the basilisk can maintain its strength even after shrinking in size. Roar, hiss, hiss. What is it called? It's just empty talk. We can't do anything to it, and it can't do anything to us for now. Killing the basilisk is indeed quite difficult, but controlling it isn't too difficult. Dumbledore is currently locked in a fierce battle with the young Tom Riddle. Although the young Tom Riddle did not have as much combat experience as his older self, his physical abilities were far superior to what he would later possess. You're old, you old fool. I think so, we'll all grow old someday. Dumbledore handled the situation relatively easily, but as he aged, he was indeed not as agile as he had been in his youth. The trees surrounding the Forbidden Forest were constantly being shattered by powerful magic. Wood chips and gravel flew through the air. That filthy mudblood is the air you chose. You old fool, your judgment is as bad as ever. Tom wasn't nervous at all. He is practically invincible. He modified his body to have extremely powerful regenerative abilities. Even vampires don't have such powerful regenerative abilities. Meanwhile, the only price he paid was becoming more emotionally unstable. I've made many mistakes in my life, but in the Raven case, I can assure you I did nothing wrong. With that, Dumbledore waved his wand. The blazing, terrifying flames almost lit up the night sky. Even Tom Riddle now felt the approach of death under this terrifying curse. His handsome face instantly contorted into a ferocious expression. Old man, you can't beat me, just like your mudblood heir can't beat my basilisk. It will tear that filthy bloodline to shreds. His trash talk had no effect whatsoever. Because Dumbledore knew very well that Raven was capable of dealing with the basilisk on his own, and that he would be fine. To put it bluntly, if they're really pushed to that point, they'll use Fiery Blaze if necessary. And then, will the basilisk still survive Fiery Blaze? The reason we're not using it now is simply because Fiendfire is ultimately dark magic, and it's better to avoid using it if possible. Moreover, even if the Fiery Blaze doesn't kill the basilisk, Raven's powerful adaptability and creativity will surely allow him to defeat it. Moreover, with such a commotion, Minerva and the others have probably already arrived. I don't think we need to focus too much on them. Come on, Tom, concentrate and give this old man some exercise. No, don't call me by that names. Raven and his men looked at the night sky stained red and immediately understood the situation on the other side. I thought if Dumbledore really wanted to, he could crush that guy with a flick of his finger. After all, Voldemort was a legendary wizard. Even if he wasn't as knowledgeable and experienced in his youth as he was in middle age, he was still a legendary wizard. Damn it. The basilisk's sudden burst of power interrupted Raven's words. The two basilisks' bodies began to expand and change rapidly, and no spell could restrain them or stop their expansion. Oh, that's amazing. These basilisk monsters actually had a backup plan. That's unbelievable. If they had such a backup plan, why didn't those snake monsters use it earlier? They're merging? That looks disgusting. The two basilisk monsters, now resembling writhing chunks of flesh, were gradually drawing closer to each other and merging. Raven decisively intervened, attempting to interrupt their fusion. However, all the attacks that hit the basilisk only accelerated the fusion of the two basilisks. We can't hesitate any longer. Raven raised his wand, ready to unleash a fiendfire on the basilisk. Aren't you a cow? Show me a fiery rage. If raging fire doesn't work, there's always the big melon to eat. Eating a big melon once or twice won't affect a user's mindset or personality. However, the professors who arrived at the next moment disrupted Raven's plans. Professor McGonagall unleashed an explosion curse, while Professor Flitwick planned to summon lightning to strike the basilisk dead. Professor Sprout intended to protect Raven and Fleur first, so he remotely cast an iron armor charm on them. Without a second thought, Snape unleashed a devastating attack. Raven didn't even have time to explain the basilisk's characteristics before the curse was already upon him. It's easy to imagine that these spells were quite powerful, but none of them could completely obliterate the basilisk. This in turn made the mutating serpent monster even more grotesque and deformed. Even Professor Sprout, who is usually very receptive to change things, couldn't help but feel disgusted by the basilisk as he jogged up to Raven and the others. For Merlin's sake, what on earth is this? You guys acted way too fast, Professor. I didn't even have time to explain. This serpent monster is impossible to kill by normal means. Every piece of flesh that falls from its body can quickly grow back into a complete serpent monster, and its recovery speed is also extremely fast. And we feel that its recovery speed seems to be getting faster and faster. What kind of magical creature is this? Does this kind of creature exist in nature? Wrong. Professor Sprout frowned and looked at Fleur. Who are you? Hibiscus Delacquer lady. Huh? Aren't you in Beauxbatons? Professor Sprout's eyes widened. Her mind was completely muddled. Professor, I think the most important problem we need to solve right now is this serpent monster in front of us. I'm planning to use Fiendfire. Raven spoke up. What? Where did you learn that? Albus, damn it, no, we can't use Fiendfire, that's evil black magic. Does it get stronger the more you hit it? This creature makes absolutely no sense. Where did the extra flesh on its body come from? Where does it get the energy to recover? Grindelwald, I need to know what this thing is. Where did it come from? Snape practically roared those words. There's no point in yelling at me. This guy was created by Voldemort. Alfoon. Don't mention that name. Also, is this monster created by the mysterious person? How did he? Raven interrupted the professors again. None of that matters. What matters is how we stop it now. Hitting it won't work. Professors, you've all seen it. The more we hit it, the stronger the basilisk becomes. But it must have weaknesses, right? All living things have weaknesses. There's no reason for it to be invincible. Professor McGonagall frowned, speaking as she restrained the basilisk. She now understood why Raven had even considered using Fiendfire earlier. This serpent monster seems to be virtually unsolvable at present. We can't hit them, though. They can't kill him. Unfortunately, this guy is also an idiot, so there's no way to communicate with him. Using Fiery Blaze is currently the optimal solution. Impressive, perhaps you should go to Azkaban instead of staying at Hogwarts. Snape spoke with disdain. There was a strange sense of incongruity in hearing these words from a former Death Eater. And what brilliant idea do you have, Professor Snape, to poison it? Forgive my bluntness, but even cutting off its head didn't work. If you think you can kill it with poison, it'll probably drink it like sugar water in no time. Currently, Raven and his team have collected a total of 4 pieces of information. First, the basilisk can shrink or enlarge its size while maintaining its strength. Secondly, all the flesh that falls off the basilisk can be regenerated into a completely new basilisk individual. Then, with each injury, the basilisk undergoes a certain degree of evolution. Finally, multiple basilisks could merge together, forming the enormous and disgusting multi-headed basilisk they were now facing. Where's Albus? This is exactly the time we need him. Damn it, Phileas, help me, that guy is incredibly strong. The basilisk is getting stronger, and even Professor McGonagall can't suppress it on her own. For Merlin's sake. What are you little wizards doing out here? Are the statues of the prefect in the common room just for show? Professor Sprout was so angry when he saw the other young wizards running out that he felt dizzy. The professor here can't even control the basilisk by himself, and you little wizards are just making things worse. Professor, we're here to help. You've come, HMPH, okay, get out of here quickly. We don't need your help right now, get out of here, it's dangerous. Professor Sprout wanted to reprimand the young wizards for being too reckless, but the words wouldn't come out. Many of the young wizards rushed over with their wands in hand, not even having time to change their clothes. Is it overestimating one's abilities? There definitely is. However, it cannot be denied that their starting point was absolutely correct. Damn it, that basilisk is incredibly strong. Even with their combined efforts, Professors Flitwick and McGonagall could not completely subdue the basilisk. Snape was surprised to find that the basilisk was still getting used to his shadowless blade. Originally, the divine sword without shadow was a curse. Without breaking the curse, the wounds would never heal. But at this moment, the snake's eye, which he had slashed with the divine sharpness, was slowly recovering, and the recovery speed was even accelerating. This serpent monster is outrageous. Raven smirked. He finally remembered where the sense of déjà vu he felt about the basilisk came from, that damned immortal lizard. This guy's abilities are basically a carbon copy of the immortal lizard. What should we do? Raven gritted his teeth. To hell with it. Even the undying lizard will suffer a blast from my fiery blaze. Raven suddenly raised his wand and before anyone could react, unleashed a fiendfire. The intense heat seemed to boil the very air. Raven's fiery blaze wasn't orange red but a deep blue. He had learned Grindelwald's fire shield, and after that his fiendfire spell turned a pale blue. Grindelwald always said that Raven was a genius in dark magic. In Raven's hands, the attack power of almost all dark magic would double. Roar. The moment the fiery blaze touched the serpent monster, the monster roared in fury. Terrifying flames spread wildly across the basilisk's entire body. Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick reacted quickly and immediately pulled the basilisk off the ground. This is fierce fire. If it touches the ground, it will probably spread instantly. Damn it, who told you to use Fiendfire? Don't you know that spell is extremely dangerous and a form of dark magic? Professor Snape, look at that basilisk. It's almost fully fused. Even now, Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick are struggling to control it. Once it's fully fused, we'll face another tough battle. It's wise to use our final measures while we still have it under control. You little. Stop arguing, everyone. Severus, come help, this basilisk is struggling too much. Raven and Fleur stood to the side, aiming their wands at the basilisk. A terrifying dark curse. Furong felt as if her silver hair was being roasted and curled by the intense heat in the air. This temperature is far beyond what a raging fire can achieve. No wonder they say this thing is extremely dangerous. Putting aside the fact that it cannot be extinguished by ordinary water and has extremely strong infectivity, the temperature alone is frightening enough. Raven, however, frowned deeply. Something's not right, something's very wrong. The serpent monster merely hissed as it was roasted, but its voice showed no sign of weakening. Raven squinted at the basilisk that was now on fire. Then his eyes widened quickly. Damn, this serpent monster is adapting to the fiery flames. Dispel the fierce flames. Raven quickly extinguished the fiery flame, which puzzled the professors. Although they didn't want Raven to use Fiendfire since he had already used it, why take it back? Damn basilisk, this guy was just getting used to the Fiendfire spell. Raven's words surprised the professors. What kind of monster is this? Doesn't that make it invincible? Raven's ruthlessness also kicked in. Even fierce fire can't subdue you, huh? Then I'll destroy you on a soul level. Raven began rapidly mentally rehearsing and adjusting the spell of light and shadow without a trace. Is that Shishan's code? I'll rip your soul out of you and see if you can recover. The idea is good, but the timing is really unfortunate. The basilisk has completed its fusion, and now even the three professors together are finding it difficult to restrain it. Fleur could tell from a glance that Raven was quickly thinking of a solution. Hang in there a little longer. Cough cough, old man, you just won't die, huh? Dumbledore, carrying the Elder Wand, slowly approached the now powerless Tom Riddle. Actually, believe it or not, I really crave a good night's sleep, but things are never truly finished. Tom is now tattered and covered in wounds. His almost invincible vitality is waning. No living thing is without weaknesses. The price of having such a powerful body was more than just making Tom Riddle more emotionally unstable. This body also made Tom Riddle's soul extremely vulnerable. The more severe and numerous his injuries, the more fragile his soul becomes. Until just now, his soul had become incredibly vulnerable. Dumbledore easily shattered Tom's soul. The Horcrux stored this fragment of his soul, but it also made his soul extremely fragile. This time with death, he no longer even had the chance to go to the other side of the curtain. You've failed again, do you have any last words? Tom Riddle gave a weak laugh. You think you've won, Dumbledore, you've lost. The miracles I create will faithfully carry out my commands. None of you can stop it. Everything you try to protect will ultimately be destroyed by it. With his last ounce of strength, he stared intently at Dumbledore, hoping to detect any loss of composure on Dumbledore's face. But the old man simply looked at him calmly. I truly hope that when you're old, you can still be as passionate and innocent as you are today. Tom is dead. The soul fragments stored in the Horcrux have only one chance to be resurrected. If you are resurrected and then die again, then you are truly dead. He never saw what he wanted to see on Dumbledore's face, not even in death. Dumbledore trusted Raven a lot, whether it's Raven's character or his abilities. Even if that basilisk is so troublesome that he can't kill it, Raven will definitely find a way to kill it. He had that much confidence in Raven. Standing before the corpse of the young Voldemort, Dumbledore recalled the past. Did he make a mistake back then? If Riddle had received more care and love from his father when he was young, would Tom have avoided becoming Voldemort? He always asked himself this question, but every time the answer was negative. Tom was inherently very ambitious. From the moment they met, Tom's heart was filled with hatred, jealousy, and scheming. No one can guide him to a completely virtuous state. At least you still have some sense of responsibility now. If only you could keep it up. Even someone like that has their merits. At least Tom Riddle still has some sense of responsibility. Since learning he has Slytherin blood, he has been diligently fulfilling Slytherin's last wish to this day. Even if this last wish was a product of his misunderstanding. Dumbledore used a spell to drag Tom's body away. I should go check on Raven's situation. Raven's situation is not looking good. The basilisk, despite being bound, evolved increasingly powerful abilities, eventually breaking free and roaming wildly along the shore of the Black Lake. The basilisk now has 9 heads, each as wide as a train engine. Its body became so enormous that it resembled a dozen tanks pieced together. The young wizards were terrified and ran around in all directions, but they could still manage to cast spells every now and then. Now I understand why Raven said that the first thing we should do after finding the basilisk is run. That damned beast has grown into a monster. Shut up, Ron, don't open your eyes. Attack it with an eye strike charm. This serpent monster is far stronger than the last one. At least for now, the young wizard's spells are unlikely to cause any further damage to the basilisk. Even if they used the eye-breaking curse to strike the basilisk's eyes directly, the basilisk's eyes wouldn't show any damage. Don't turn around, don't look around. Prefects, quickly lead your men back into the castle. The professors were getting anxious. They can no longer suppress the basilisk. Even destroying the basilisk's eyes would be difficult. 9 heads, 18 eyes. If any junior wizard were even slightly slow to react and look directly at the target, they would face instant death. Damn beast, such things shouldn't even exist. Snape, for the first time in a long time, showed a somewhat anxious expression. Professor McGonagall attempted to use transfiguration to create a cage to trap the basilisk, but the basilisk smashed through it as easily as hitting a piece of paper. She had no choice but to prioritize protecting the children and getting them away as quickly as possible. Justin, close your eyes. The little boy who was called was already stunned. Professor Sprout didn't even have time to raise his wand to pull Justin away. The basilisk was about to turn its head. At the critical moment, a powerful shockwave erupted from Raven's side. Light and shadow leave no trace. Suddenly, the moonlight around us seemed to dim considerably. Raven's eyes gleamed, and his expression quickly worsened. The light and shadowless feature already consumes a lot of resources, and the feature that Raven rushed out consumes even more resources. However, despite the exorbitant consumption, the effects are quite noticeable. The distorted light penetrated the basilisk's body, binding its twisted and deformed soul like ribbons. Get out here! Raven yanked his wand sharply, and ribbons of light instantly wrapped around the basilisk's soul, pulling it away. Roar. The basilisk let out a painful roar. This lump of Shishin code and the basilisk's body are indeed connected very closely, but Raven was no pushover either. If you can't figure it out, then increase your magic output. This serpent monster must die today. From the moment it began to actually kill the young wizard, it had no chance of survival. Get out here. Hot blood flowed from Raven's nose, but the basilisk's soul was finally torn out. The basilisk, having lost its soul, immediately collapsed and died. Its soul, however, was crushed into dust in the light and shadow. After doing all this, Raven let out a weak sigh of relief and collapsed to the ground, completely exhausted. Fleur caught Lay when just in time. Raven was using a spell earlier, so Fleur didn't dare to approach him rashly. However, now that the basilisk was clearly subdued, she could go forward and help Raven up. You created a spell even more terrifying than Fiendfire in just a few minutes. Raven smiled. How could that be? Light and shadow without a trace already had this ability. I just enhanced a small branch of it. How can a spell stronger than Fiendfire be created in just a few minutes? Even Merlin wouldn't dare to do something like this if he were alive. How dare you? How could you take a little wizard to face such danger? He's only 12, you're senile, I can't believe it. Pomona, don't be so angry, you'll hurt yourself. He's fine, isn't he? How about some honey? You'd better give us a reasonable explanation now. Otherwise, we can't guarantee we won't hand you over to Azkaban. And the professors were furious. What kind of school principal would allow their students to confront dangerous creatures like basilisks? This serpent monster is even more dangerous than a fire-breathing dragon. Everyone knows and understands that Dumbledore sees Raven as his successor. After all, Raven's talent and temperament are undeniable, making him a very suitable successor to Dumbledore. But Dumbledore can't possibly disregard Raven's safety just to train him, can he? With proper training, that's enough. Why do you keep throwing Raven into such dangerous situations? Are you afraid he won't die? Mrs. Pomfrey was furious. Raven has overdrawn his magic power yet again. Although this time it wasn't as severe as Raven's overexertion during the summer vacation, it's still enough to require a few days of rest in bed. She even subtly suggested that Raven transfer schools. Last year I almost got killed by my own defense against the dark arts professor. This summer I almost got killed by Death Eaters, and this year I almost got killed by the basilisk. So much has happened to the young wizards in the last 2 years that even Madame Pomfrey, the Hogwarts school doctor, has begun to feel sorry for the students at Hogwarts. Since you've already discovered the problem, you should have told us directly. Let us handle it, instead of you leading a 12-year-old underage wizard straight in and attacking. Are you senile? Professor McGonagall unusually agreed with Snape. Are these professors just for show? If every problem has to be solved by a student, what's the point of having professors? I'm doing this to train Raven. He needs to experience things to grow, and Phileas certainly understands that there's a significant difference between practice and real combat. Professor Flitwick frowned, but you don't need to be so harsh on a 12-year-old wizard. He's too young, and besides, this is a time of peace. Under normal circumstances, Raven might never encounter a creature like the basilisk in his entire life. Dumbledore, of course, knew that Raven was too young. But he dared not and was unwilling to let Raven grow slowly. Voldemort is still lurking in the shadows, ready to make a comeback at any moment. The Death Eaters, still harboring their treacherous intentions, are now also eyeing Raven. If Raven hadn't previously displayed terrifying strength to intimidate them, how could they have remained silent for the past few months? The magical world is far from as peaceful as it appears. You've all been spending too much time in school. The magical world is always full of dangers. That little guy needs to grow up quickly. The sudden appearance of the unfamiliar voice startled the professors. Turning around, I saw an old man slowly emerging from the shadows. No one recognized him at first glance since Grindelwald hadn't appeared in the public eye for many years. In the end, it was Snape who first recognized Grindelwald. He drew his wand and pointed it at Grindelwald. "You better not be the person I'm thinking of." "Actually, you're quite right." Grindelwald sat down on the sofa. "What's going on?"
Who is he, Severus?
Snape frowned and spoke slowly in his deep voice. "If I'm not mistaken, the person before us now should be known as the first Dark Lord Gellert Grindelwald."
Damn it.
"What's wrong with Hogwarts this year? How could it be so dangerous?" The atmosphere immediately became tense. "Come on, you'd better put your wands away. If I really wanted to, you wouldn't even have a chance to pull them out."
That's the truth.
If it really came down to a fight, Grindelwald could take down all the professors present in just a few moves, except for Dumbledore. "Albus, we need an explanation. Why is the first Dark Lord here with you?" "Actually, that name is just a rumor. I prefer to call myself a revolutionary." Dumbledore reluctantly spoke up to ease the tension, and then recounted how Grindelwald had been teaching Raven during this time. Undoubtedly, the professors went into another frenzy. "You're really crazy. They actually let a Dark Lord teach Raven. If anything goes wrong, Dumbledore will personally raise a third Dark Lord. This third-generation Dark Lord will be even more powerful and terrifying than his two predecessors. Don't be so wary. At least that little guy won't go down the path you're imagining. What a pity." Grindelwald said calmly. "He has abandoned his plan to let Raven continue down his old path. He's been looking into the Muggle world these past few days. Raven is right. The power of the Muggle world is beyond the reach of wizards. If a war were to actually break out, it would be the wizards, not the Muggles, who would ultimately lose." The old man couldn't see what the future held for the magical world, nor did he want to care. "I've really had enough today. I can't control you all anymore. Luckily, the child is at least somewhat obedient. At least I can get him to pay more attention to his health and safety." Professor Sprout was truly at his wit's end. Dumbledore, Grindelwald, she can't control any of those guys. She could only manage her own students, telling Raven to be more careful about his safety, and she would also pay more attention to Raven's safety. Professor Sprout left. Her mind was a mess. Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick left soon after. They couldn't control Dumbledore, and they also had to manage the young wizards in their own house. Many of the young wizards who were running around earlier were Gryffindor and Ravenclaw students. They need to hurry up and teach them a lesson. "Don't worry about Severus, I know what I'm doing." Snape looked at Dumbledore with his cold eyes. "You'd better be careful otherwise. A Dark Lord with almost unparalleled talent in spellcasting, potion-making, and alchemy will be unstoppable in the magical world. If Raven really becomes the Dark Lord, then there's no point in expecting anyone in the wizarding world to stop him." Snape also left the headmaster's office. Dumbledore breathed a slight sigh of relief. Finally, this matter is over. The professors were quite intimidating just now. They are weak.
What they said makes sense.
Perhaps I really should slow down the pace of developing Raven. That basilisk was as tall as a small mountain. I bet it had hundreds of heads. Ron, the basilisk's corpse is still outside Hogwarts. Everyone can see it only has 9 heads. The young wizards were incredibly excited. Witnessing a basilisk being utterly destroyed by Raven was incredibly exciting for them. The young wizards who didn't go that night all regretted it. "I should have been bolder and gone with them back then." Raven recovered in 3 days. His body seemed to be recovering its magic power much faster due to the increasing number of times he overexerted himself. This might be a way to train a young wizard's magic, but Madame Pomfrey strictly forbids Raven from using such methods to train himself. This kind of overdraft has a chance of causing organ failure in wizards. Although organ failure can be treated with dying medicine, no one can guarantee that overuse of that stuff will not lead to drug resistance. If something unexpected happens, no one can save Raven. Preventing any possibility of accidents is what a school doctor should do. Hagrid's recovery speed is even faster than Raven's. The bloodline of the half-giant should not be underestimated. After recovering, he immediately sought out Raven to express his apologies. He brought Raven a large basket of expensive and precious magical fruits, so big that Raven could fit inside it. Hagrid felt it was all his fault. If he had been more astute and had noticed the problem in time, this wouldn't have happened. He cried so hard his tears were almost enough to fill a bathtub. It took Raven a long time to comfort him before he was finally calmed down. On the 3rd day of Raven's hospitalization, Fudge and other Ministry of Magic members arrived at Hogwarts. They lavished praise on Raven's bravery, but Raven could tell from their conversation and glances that Fudge didn't actually want to come at all. "Are you sure Raven can be discharged? He's only been resting for 3 days." Mrs. Pomfrey nodded. Don't worry about Pomona, he's as strong as an ox, there's absolutely nothing wrong with him. There's no need for him to stay in the school infirmary any longer, but you still need to keep an eye on him and make sure he gets plenty of rest lately. Professor Sprout confirmed that Raven was indeed ready for discharge before taking him away. You were too reckless this time, you didn't need to go on such a dangerous mission with Albus. It's not like there are only the two of you left in the academy. There can't be a next time, Raven. Of course, Professor Sprout. Raven is always like this. He behaves very obediently in front of the professor, but becomes extremely bold when it comes to doing something serious. I'm serious, Raven. Albus advocates using some extreme methods to help you grow quickly, and perhaps you agree with his views. But what I'm saying is, you're still just a minor wizard. Your abilities and mindset already far surpass those of your peers. There's no need for you to force yourself to grow so fast. Raven's life has just begun, and he hasn't faced any truly terrifying enemies yet, so he needs to grow up quickly. Therefore, the professors unanimously agreed that Raven had absolutely no need to use such a dangerous method to force himself to grow up quickly. I understand, Professor. Don't worry, it won't happen again. Because next time he will create an absolutely powerful spell. A curse that uses invincibility as its defining characteristic. After this experience, Raven finally understood what kind of talent spell he truly desired. His light and shadowless technique is incredibly powerful and comprehensive, but its consumption cannot be reduced at all, and its power is too limited by the amount of magic power available. His research into dreams also allows him to create powerful spells through this mysterious dimension, but such spells are extremely costly. Without affecting the real world, even the most powerful spells related to dreams won't be ridiculously powerful, no matter how high their cost. For example, the Veil Charm, which is currently the most expensive dream charm, but even Harry can use it almost every day. These are dream spells that don't affect reality. Their energy consumption, however high, never reaches an exaggerated level. However, dream curses that affect reality are a completely different matter. During his hospitalization, Raven briefly simulated how much energy the dream curse that affected reality would consume. The result was frightening. The power of this spell is currently unknown, but its cost is terrifyingly high. As for Raven now, even if he could create the spell, he wouldn't have enough magic power to activate it. Even a legendary wizard like Dumbledore would probably only last 3 or 4 uses before he couldn't take it anymore. Ultimately, it all boils down to one thing: mana consumption. Raven's problem now isn't the power of the spell, but rather the mana consumption. So Raven figured it out. He figured out what kind of talent spell he wanted. He wanted a new spell with low mana cost and high power. A versatile spell with extremely strong overall capabilities, capable of both attacking and providing support. He's greedy. He's always been greedy. Since there can only be one innate spell, he must include every function he can think of. Once he casts this spell, he will be a legendary wizard, and naturally he will no longer encounter so-called danger so easily. Okay, I hope you really mean what you say. Speaking of which, regarding the key you gave that girl, although we don't plan to pursue the matter, you should still use it sparingly, understand? Yes, Professor, I understand. The key to Furong's door is theoretically definitely non-compliant. If things really come to a head, both Hibiscus's and Raven's door keys will be taken away. However, after discussion, the professor still did not take away the door keys from Raven and Fleur. After all, there's no point in taking it away. This thing was made by Raven, and it's not some unique, irreplaceable masterpiece. If the professors really do take them all, Raven can just make a few more. However, although the professors could leave Raven and Fleur's door keys and jewelry alone, they should still give them a heads up. Go back to your dorm and rest. The professors originally wanted Raven to be a teaching assistant, so he could help the students review in the last month before finals. However, the sudden appearance of the basilisk monster made the professors abandon this idea. What Raven needs now is rest, not more work. So Professor Sprout didn't bring it up. Before leaving Professor Sprout's office, Raven asked him if he needed help with pest control in the herb garden. There are no basilisks now, but many of the insects that fled into the castle have made their home here, and they probably won't be returning to the Forbidden Forest, so the professors will have to arrange an insect control operation soon. However, Professor Sprout clearly did not intend to involve Raven in this matter. Raven, we've got this under control. You just need to rest well and don't worry about these things. Well, Raven was happy to have some peace and quiet. He took one last look at the basilisk's corpse before returning to his dormitory. It's worth mentioning that the basilisk's eyeballs retained their power even after its death. Raven obtained 2 snake eyeballs. Although the professors and Dumbledore agreed that such dangerous objects should be completely destroyed, and Raven himself had no idea what use the two eyeballs he had obtained could be. But he managed to get his hands on the two basilisk's eyeballs. I thought what you said about a snake as big as a train was an exaggeration. Standing before the basilisk's corpse, Zane couldn't help but sigh. This was also the first time he had ever seen such a huge and terrifying creature. It's like a small mountain. A single head could easily swallow a small car, but this corpse has 9 heads. This basilisk is larger. It's a product of modification. Normally, it should only have 1 head and it shouldn't be this big. Zane nodded. This basilisk looks a lot like the kind of modified monsters that often appear in games. I see no bullet holes on it. You didn't use the weapon we gave you. This serpent monster is impervious to damage. Whether you use spells or firearms, hitting it won't have much effect. It will quickly recover and become even stronger. So how did you finally subdue it? I heard from your professors that you were the one who finally overpowered it. I took his soul away. Zane raised an eyebrow, then reached out and ruffled Raven's white hair. You really are a dangerous element. This is genetic. No one else in our family is in as much danger as you. In the East, this is called the student surpasses the teacher. Zane smiled. Anyway, I'm relieved to see you're all right. Keep these things. They might not be of much use in the short term, but it's good to have them. You never know when they might come in handy. Zane shoved a large box of weapons into Raven's hands. These techniques may not be as effective as Raven's, which directly extract people's souls, but they should still produce some surprising results in certain situations. Raven opened the box and his lips twitched involuntarily. They even called me a dangerous element. This box is full of highly lethal weapons. Automatic rifles, grenades, even 2 landmines. From an objective standpoint, this family is truly the most dangerous of the dangerous. All right, put it away. I'll go see your principal and then I'll leave. Raven took his father, Zane, back to the castle to find Dumbledore. Along the way, they attracted many curious observations from young wizards. This is Raven's father. Of course they were curious. That's Raven's dad, he looks really classy. Ryan spoke up. He never imagined he would see a muggle at Hogwarts. Even this muggle entered the school legitimately as a member of the board of directors. He looks just like Raven. My God, Ack, do you want to hear what you're saying? Who would say a father is like a son? Raven isn't an adopted child. If he didn't look like Zane, that would be a real problem. But why is Raven's hair white while his father's hair is gray? Who knows? I think Raven was just too tired, which caused his gray hair to fade to white. Nonsense, faded white hair and natural white hair are completely different. Raven's is obviously natural white hair, okay. Raven and Zane didn't seem to care much about the stares they were getting. If you want to watch it, then watch it. Find the headmaster's office, which is currently in disarray inside the castle. On the way, they ran into the Weasleys, who were having a family meeting. Don't do this, Mom. We know we were wrong. Yes, Mom, don't confiscate our things. Mrs. Weasley was very resolute. No way. I said I'd confiscate it and that's it. And I want to remind you this is just the beginning. You'll see during summer vacation there's more to come. Mrs. Weasley's anger did not subside with time. On the contrary, it burned even brighter. You can tell by the fact that she came back to Hogwarts with us today. She was really furious. The Weasley twins often caused trouble at school, but Mrs. Weasley had never been this angry. The reason she was so angry this time was because the Gemini hadn't considered whether Raven would be affected by the trouble they caused. What if a young wizard spreads this story, and then a malicious reporter exaggerates it? Mrs. Weasley could already imagine how Rita Skeeter would write this after she gave it to her. Is the game created by this rising star in the magical world simply to enrich the young wizards' after-school lives, or is there some other purpose? Is it really a good idea to let little wizards play games like this? Although Rita Skeeter has been writing articles that are favorable to Raven lately, Mrs. Weasley doesn't think she'll stay on Raven's side forever. This woman is a fence-sitter. She only cares about her own interests. Then why only take our things? Ron made a mistake too. Hey, this is none of my business. Ron, who had been happily watching the show from the sidelines, suddenly had his face fall after being nagged by George. Your younger brother isn't like you. He makes 7 small mistakes and 1 big one a week. Upon hearing this, Ron immediately straightened his back and raised his head. That's right, Mom is right. Mrs. Weasley glared at Ron. Of course, if you can't control yourself either, I won't mind taking your toys away too. Upon hearing this, Ron immediately shrank back. Yes, Mom, don't worry. Mrs. Weasley really was like an angry lioness. However, she always changes her expression very quickly. His smile immediately returned when he saw Raven. It's nice to meet you, Raven. I'm sorry they caused you trouble. Raven smiled and waved his hand. No, it's no trouble at all, you're too kind. Young wizards generally lack self-control, so even if the problem of playing games in class doesn't surface now, it will eventually. All right, the reprimand is done. Let's leave this matter here for now. We need to get Zane and the others down to their work. Lucius has already gone into the principal's office. Mr. Weasley stepped in to smooth things over. They have important business to attend to at the school today. Zane originally came to the school just to see Raven, but after the basilisk incident, his visit took on an additional purpose: handling the aftermath of the basilisk incident. The appearance of such a large and dangerous basilisk at Hogwarts certainly requires careful handling and cleanup. As a member of the Hogwarts Board of Governors and Raven's father, he certainly had to participate in the discussion. I know the rest, I just have one question. Reese, do you want the basilisk's corpse? The corpses of these magical creatures all seem to be quite valuable, so if Raven wants one, Zane will try to acquire it. I don't need the whole thing, but I'd like a skeleton as a keepsake. The basilisk's corpse was actually not very useful. Its most useful parts were its fangs and eyeballs. However, Dumbledore had already plucked out all the fangs, and Raven had 2 eyeballs. Therefore, Raven wouldn't need the entire corpse. A skeleton would suffice for his collection and research. After such a major incident, both I and the other board members unanimously doubt whether you are still capable of sitting in the position of principal. He lacks the ability, so do you. Upon entering the headmaster's office, everyone heard Lucius attacking Dumbledore. Zane spoke coldly. Although he didn't like Dumbledore, he acknowledged Dumbledore's abilities. Putting aside whether Dumbledore was always scheming, in terms of ability alone, even Zane would have a hard time finding someone who could match him. He's incompetent. Does that mean you, Lucius Malfoy, are? A family that's like weather vanes, swaying whichever way the wind blows. Their only commendable ability is their knack for changing sides with the wind, and it's through this ability that they've made a lot of money. Upon seeing Zane, Lucius instinctively flashed a hint of mockery, but then, as if remembering something, he angrily suppressed his emotions. Raven watched everything clearly from the side. I don't know what methods his father used to intimidate these guys. Raven knew all too well how arrogant these purebloods were. Getting them to bow down to a muggle is no easy feat. I have some things to take care of later, so let's get this over with quickly. Zane sat down on the sofa next to him, and his aura immediately swept over everyone present. Generally speaking, Zane is very polite. At least they won't just sit down on someone else's turf without asking any questions. But there are very few people present today that he likes. Needless to say, those school board members all had a clear-eyed stupidity about them. Their emotions were practically written all over their faces, and they couldn't even act convincingly. As for Dumbledore, Zane wouldn't exactly be hostile towards him, but he certainly wouldn't like him either. Most importantly, among these people, apart from Dumbledore, it was absolutely impossible for anyone else to get along with him. No matter how well he tries to maintain a good attitude, these pureblood nobles of the magical world will never respect a muggle. Since that's the case, why waste our time? First, as a member of the Board of Trustees, I disagree with replacing Dumbledore as headmaster of Hogwarts at this time. Second, I want the basilisk skeleton. Don't try to change my mind, it's a waste of time. The other board members present were stunned. They had never participated in such straightforward negotiations before, and for a moment they were a bit overwhelmed. What's the point of negotiating anymore? They've already stated their 2 main demands, and there's no point in trying to persuade them. Their attitude is crystal clear. There's no point in saying anything more, right? You filthy. Watch your mouth, Mr. Malfoy, we still have a score to settle. Raven spoke coldly. He stood behind Zane, his hands behind his back. His scarlet eyes swept coldly across Lucius Malfoy's face. His eyes were very similar to Zane's. Dumbledore couldn't help but laugh silently. The father and son are exactly alike. I haven't done anything to you. Really, are you sure? Do you need me to help you recall the little tricks you played at Flourish and Blots? Mr. Malfoy, sometimes you'd better take it easy, otherwise things will escalate and it won't do you any good. Lucius gasped in shock. He knows. That little wizard, that filthy mudblood, he knows what he did that day. I don't know what you're talking about. Before he could finish speaking, Raven opened his crossbody bag and took out a black diary. Even with only a corner showing, Lucius instantly recognized it as the damned diary. For a moment, his breathing almost stopped. Dobby, who was standing in the corner of the room, was incredibly excited watching this scene. I believe Mr. Ravens is right. We'll discuss this later, Mr. Lucius, but please watch your mouth, or I can't guarantee this won't be in the newspapers tomorrow. Lucius completely shut down this time. He had no doubt that the mudblood wizard in front of him would keep his word. After all, his muggle father was that kind of person. The letters might even be in the beaks of owls now, ready to take flight at any moment. Seeing Lucius like this, Zane smirked. As expected of their child, he's already so outstanding. All right, you can say whatever you want to say now, I'm in a hurry. Zane is talking nonsense. He actually had nothing to do that afternoon. The reason I say this is simply because I don't want to waste too much time with these pure-blooded nobles. The subsequent negotiations were much simpler. The other board members in the principal's office all offered their own bargaining chips, attempting to achieve their goals. Unfortunately, Zane had absolutely no interest in any of those things. One of the school board members said that if they achieved their goal, they could help with the subsequent promotion of Raven's toys. But Raven said he didn't need their help at all. Soon, all the school board members returned empty-handed and left in disgrace. Lucius also planned to slip away among the school board members, but Raven was keeping a close eye on him, and there was no way he would let him escape in the chaos. Don't be in such a hurry, Mr. Lucius. We haven't finished resolving our matters yet. Raven spoke slowly, and Lucius's heart sank. Seeing this, Dumbledore smiled and then gestured for Zane to follow him to the second floor of the headmaster's office. Zane also wanted to take this opportunity to train his son, so naturally there was no problem. Only Raven, Dobby, and Lucius remain on the first floor of the principal's office. Mr. Lucius, tell me, how much are you willing to pay for this secret? Raven took out his notebook and placed it on his lap. Seeing this, Lucius understood that Raven must have figured this out completely, and any further struggle would only make him look worse. What do you want? I want your house elf Dobby. Impossible. House elves are one of the symbols of a pure-blooded family's long-standing heritage. How could you give this to Raven? Please lower your voice, Mr. Lucius. I've always believed that nothing is impossible in the wizarding world, and I think you seem a little confused about your current situation. You think you can fool my servant with this disgusting diary? What can you do? At most, you'll just cause us some trouble. Raven smiled. Really, is that what you think? Let's imagine what would happen if I revealed this diary. Lucius sneered. What's the matter? I can settle this with just a few galleons. And the Malfoy family has no shortage of galleons. Oh really? Then let's do the math. If you don't resolve the issue with me, you'll have to pay the Daily Prophet, pay the Dissenter, pay the American Ghost newspaper, pay the French Wine Daily, and pay other newspapers and magazines in those 3 countries. You'll have to pay them all. And perhaps you've forgotten, but I am a holder of the Order of Merlin First Class. This indicates 2 things. First, they will definitely take what I revealed seriously. Second, if they want to settle what I revealed, they will definitely ask for a higher price, since it's tantamount to offending me, and asking for too low a price wouldn't be worthwhile. So is your servant worth that much money? Upon realizing this, Lucius's face turned pale. If it were just the Daily Prophet, it wouldn't be too difficult to deal with. The Malfoy family still has some resources. However, if newspapers and magazines from other countries are also included, the amount of galleons required would be considerable. Perhaps you truly care about your servants, even if it costs you hundreds of thousands or even millions of galleons. Enraged, Lucius placed his left hand on his scepter, intending to draw his wand and strike Raven. But Raven was faster. Before he could even draw his wand, Raven's beautiful wand was already pressed against Lucius's chin. Don't even think about it, Mr. Lucius. Dobby, what are you doing? Why aren't you? Oh no, I'm sure you wouldn't want to do that, Mr. Lucius. After all, the greatest white wizard of this century is upstairs. Lucius gritted his teeth. This matter has now reached a dead end for him. If you don't agree to Raven's request, he'll expose this. Don't assume that public opinion in other countries won't affect the Malfoy family in the UK. In this day and age, any country that stirs up a huge wave of public opinion related to the Malfoy family can bring them considerable trouble. The last time they spent a lot of money to quell public opinion was during Voldemort's downfall. At the time, Lucius spent a lot of money to suppress all the negative rumors about his family. However, because of their family's traditional skill of swaying whichever way the wind blows, they made a lot of money during Voldemort's downfall. The positive and negative values canceled each other out, and in the end, they even made a profit. But this time is different. This time, they won't gain anything from calming the public opinion stirred up by Raven. It simply means paying money. Most importantly, Raven was right. As a holder of the Order of Merlin First Class, the information he revealed was something Lucius couldn't.
Hello, everyone. As we wrap up this video, I want to share a quick note. I have a Patreon account. If you'd like to support me and enjoy on-demand audiobooks, you can become a Patreon member. Alternatively, you can check out my Google Drive link, which has 500 plus novel audiobooks available through my Ko-fi or Patreon shop. I appreciate your support.